Hey guys, all right, settling in. Good. Because tonight we're going on a different kind of journey. Not through time in the usual sense, sifting through historical dust motes, and not into the heart of some physical mystery in a ruin or on a battlefield. Tonight we're journeying inward, into the intricate, perhaps dangerous landscape of one man's memory. And you're drifting, aren't you, right here, right now, wherever you are? Maybe your room is gently cooling down as the day lets go its hold and quiet starts to gather outside. Or perhaps you're listening in daylight but allowing the feeling of dusk, the feeling of slowing down to wash over you. Imagine the light outside softening, stretching long shadows, like those lazy, satisfied stretches a cat makes all fluid grace and quiet strength. And as those shadows deepen, imagine a peculiar sense settling over everything. The feeling that just beyond the very mundane, predictable, edged-out reality of your everyday world, there might be something else, something different. Something extraordinary, something so utterly outside the realm of your normal experience that grappling with it mentally might feel precarious, like walking too close to the edge of a cliff you didn't even know existed. So just for a moment before you get comfortable, and if you feel the pull of what I do here resonates with you, take that second to click that little like button on the video. It truly helps. And if you haven't yet, and you enjoy exploring these kinds of spaces with me, hitting subscribe ensures we can keep taking these journeys together. It matters genuinely. And as the world outside whatever walls hold you starts its process of quieting, getting ready for its own version of sleep or stillness, do me a favor. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now. What city? What country? And what time is it for you there as these words reach you across whatever miles separate us? Knowing that you're out there scattered across different corners of the globe, across different moments of the night or day somehow it makes telling these stories feel a little less solitary. We're on this strange journey together in our separate quiet spaces. Now if you can dim the lights, let your eyes adjust to the softer light, letting the sharper edges of the world recede. Maybe turn on a fan or listen to the distant hum of your environment, letting that gentle background noise create its own sort of stillness, a non-demanding presence. And just ease in. Sink back into your chair, into your bed, pull a blanket closer. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story you're about to hear isn't just a dusty account from some forgotten historical ledger. It doesn't feel academic or detached. No, it feels intensely personal, vividly, hauntingly personal. It was relayed to me, you see, late one evening by an acquaintance who in turn had been entrusted with it. This is a hand-me-down secret passed from one confidant to another, now finding its way to you through my words. The secret belongs to a man you would likely recognize the name of if you were keeping abreast of public affairs in a certain era. Stephen Innes Wallace. Wallace. You recognize the name, yes, Wallace. Imagine yourself sitting there listening to your acquaintance, perhaps in the soft, flickering gaslight of his rooms, the flame hissing gently, or maybe in the slightly harsher, pale, ambient glow filtering in from outside. Edwardian London's nascent electric grid just beginning to push back the omnipresent night, casting those new strange shadows that hadn't existed before. And he told you about Wallace. Stephen Innes Wallace, the rising star, the man being whispered about in political circles, the one pegged for significant political greatness. You saw his name quoted in the papers, his words dissected, analyzed. He was always described impeccably dressed, articulate, utterly confident. When you thought of him, you pictured him striding through the grand corridors of power, maybe under the vast, magnificent dome of the newly renovated Reading Room at the British Museum. Imagine that space soaring, filled with the hushed weight of centuries of knowledge. Pictured him soaking up information like a sponge designed for wisdom, or delivering compelling speeches at crowded liberal rallies, holding audiences rapt with his calm, clear logic and persuasive rhetoric. This was by all external accounts a man clearly going places, moving upwards. He seemed to navigate the complex currents of his era, a time when Britain stood undeniably at what felt like the zenith of its imperial power, the air humming with global influence and technological progress. Yet even then, if you looked closely, you could feel the subtle tremors of change beginning to run beneath that seemingly stable surface. Like the nascent stirrings of the suffragette movement, for instance, beginning to gain voice, small but determined cracks appearing in the old edifice of established order, challenging ingrained assumptions about who held power and who belonged. Wallace, you assumed, was someone who understood these currents, perhaps intended to guide them, shape them. And your friend leaning forward slightly now, lowering his voice almost conspiratorially in that gaslight, or the pale electric glow, tells you something else, something that completely changed your perception of the man. He tells you that beneath that polished, utterly confident public surface, Wallace carried a weight, a significant weight. It wasn't exactly a visible burden, but something internal, an immense private sorrow, or perhaps more accurately, a relentless consuming yearning, a longing, a deep, abiding hunger for something just out of reach, something he felt had brushed against his life, something beautiful, something perfect, but which had never stayed. It was the kind of longing that felt like a missing limb you still occasionally phantom ache for. He didn't wear this pain openly, of course. That wasn't the done thing. He maintained the impeccable facade the world demanded of its rising stars, particularly in public life. But if you knew him or looked closely enough, perhaps you could catch it. In a slight tension around his eyes that never quite relaxed. In the way his gaze would occasionally drift off towards some unseen horizon mid-conversation, as if for just a second he wasn't entirely present with you, but was scanning a landscape only he could see. Searching perhaps for a lost street sign in his own mind. Your acquaintance describes how Wallace spoke about this only rarely. This wasn't casual chatter over port. This was something guarded. He chose his confidants with extreme caution. And that, you realize, is how you found yourself here now, listening. On the receiving end of this strange inheritance, you are being entrusted with a secret that perhaps goes some way towards explaining the quiet torment that your friend saw lurking behind the eyes of a man the world saw as the very epitome of success, strength, and forward momentum. A secret that shaped his interior world no matter how smooth his exterior appeared. Wallace's early life, the parts of it lived before this secret story unfolded, seemed perfectly conventional. Remarkable only in the best way possible if you aimed for a respectable, upwardly mobile career in that era. He was born into a family of comfortable means, received a solid education in the appropriate institutions, and showed early promise. He moved through the expected stages of life: preparatory school, then perhaps one of the great public schools, then on to university. Each step applauded, each achievement a confirmation of the predictable, successful path laid out for him. Yet even as he excelled in academia, mastering classic languages or intricate mathematics, then in law, learning to build cases with logic and rhetoric, and finally in politics, learning to navigate the currents of public opinion and parliamentary procedure, this peculiar, distinct current ran beneath the surface of his being. It wasn't like a scar, something disruptive and visible from the outside, drawing immediate attention. It was more like an extra sense, an internal organ attuned to a frequency only he seemed able to pick up. While others processed the world at one level, he had this hidden reception constantly humming just below conscious thought. He became a brilliant advocate, a skilled debater mastering the art of rhetoric, charming colleagues, dismantling opponents' arguments with cool, measured logic. Imagine him in a courtroom or on the floor of the Commons, composed, incisive, and yet, imagine him sometimes pausing mid-sentence during a debate, a fleeting shadow crossing his face. For a microsecond he seems distracted, pulled, by some internal whisper only he can hear, only he can feel. It's kind of like trying to give a crucial high-stakes presentation at work, the one that could make or break things, while a phantom mosquito is buzzing right next to your ear, loudly, constantly. Everyone else in the room is completely oblivious, listening intently to your words, focusing on the facts and figures. But for you, it's an irritating, utterly undeniable distraction. A small, constant reminder of something other while you're forced to perform in the here and now. You listen to your friend, mesmerized by this unfolding portrait. He's not just sketching the outline of a politician's biography. He's revealing the interior landscape of a man perpetually looking over his shoulder. Searching. Searching for what? For something that touched him profoundly as a small child. Something so powerful, so deeply etched into his consciousness, that its memory, its very existence, dictated the hidden rhythm of his entire adult life, guiding his deepest, most private motivations. Modern psychologists might argue today about the nature of intensely impactful, particularly childhood memories. Are they perfectly preserved snapshots of a singular event? Or are they constantly reshaped narratives, subtly or not so subtly influenced by everything that comes after? every subsequent experience, every gain, every loss, every adult understanding of the world. Does Wallace remember this initial event exactly as it was, like a perfectly preserved specimen? Or is he perhaps unknowingly chasing a story he has gently, gradually rewritten over the decades, imbuing it with layers of meaning that a child couldn't have articulated but which felt inherent to the experience even then? This question, this fundamental uncertainty about the nature of his memory versus the objective reality of the past, hangs in the air between you and your friend. Your friend, however, assures you of one thing: Wallace's account was vivid, utterly unshakably convinced of its reality. Wallace wasn't prone to flights of fancy. He was a man of facts, after all, a barrister, someone whose profession relied entirely on observable evidence, on presenting logical arguments based on tangible proof. And yet, this door had been, according to Stephen Innes Wallace, undeniably real, as real, more real even than the chair you're sitting on right now. And it had shaped him, more perhaps than any law he helped pass through Parliament, more than any opponent he vanquished in a courtroom debate, more even perhaps than any conventional love he might have found or lost during his public and private life. Because those were elements of the conventional world. This was something else entirely. You try to picture it. Wallace, sharp, articulate, able to reduce incredibly complex political or legal issues into simple, understandable truths for public consumption, confident, grounded in reality. And now imagine that same man secretly, fundamentally grappling with this utterly ineffable, potentially unbelievable experience. It feels almost absurd. Like picturing your stern, stoic high school principal admitting to you in a quiet moment that he secretly believes in fairies, and that their reality explains more about the universe than physics does. The sheer contrast between the public man and this private confession is frankly compelling. The world saw one man, ambitious, capable, rising. This private shared confession revealed another, driven not primarily by ambition or duty or even societal contribution, but by a deep, persistent, sometimes agonizing ache for something luminous, something perfect that had appeared briefly and then vanished too quickly. Your friend described Wallace's recounting of this experience. It was slow, deliberate, imbued with a kind of reverence for the lost thing, and a bottomless, pervasive regret. The regret, your friend explained, wasn't about specific paths taken in the conventional sense, not regretting a particular career move or a speech delivered badly or a friendship handled poorly. No. The regret, the true weight of it, was about paths not taken opportunities missed, opportunities he believed presented to him again and again, and the root of it all, the central focus of this entire intense private saga, centered on a door, a specific door, in a specific, otherwise unremarkable wall, encountered first during a childhood walk. You hear this quiet sketch of Stephen Innes Wallace, the brilliant politician, the successful public figure, defined not in his own estimation by his achievements or his standing in the world, but by a memory, a singular vision. Your friend explained that Wallace traced this fundamental element of his being back to his very earliest distinct memories, not vague impressions of infancy, but structured recollections that stood out from the background blur of early childhood. He wasn't much older than 5 years old at the time. Picture it. Try to inhabit that moment, that age. Picture yourself as a small child, maybe dressed in short trousers or a simple frock typical of the era. You're probably clutching a simple toy, a wooden hoop and stick perhaps, or a small tin soldier, or just clutching the warm, large hand of a parent. You're feeling utterly dwarfed by the sheer scale of the adult world around you. Buildings seem immense, streets feel endless. London in that era, though rapidly changing, pushing relentlessly towards industrial modernity, still held pockets of old-world charm, along with areas of stern, imposing, and rapidly growing Victorian and Edwardian architecture. Walking through the city then wasn't like zooming past in sealed metal boxes, seeing the world through glass screens. You felt the city. You felt the uneven cobblestones under your feet, a constant rhythm. You smelled the air, a thick, complex mixture of coal smoke from countless chimneys, horse manure from the omnipresent carriages, damp earth from nearby parks or areas under construction. Maybe the faint, tantalizing whiff of baking bread from a corner shop. It was a symphony of bustling life, earthy odors and machine noises. You heard the clip-clop of horses pulling cabs and carts, a steady beat on the cobbles. the distant rumble of early motor vehicles beginning to appear. Or perhaps the low, constant growl of the underground railway, the tube, a marvel of modern engineering carving new strange pathways deep beneath the old organic skin of the city. Remember how those early tube tunnels could sometimes get quite airless, a slightly metallic enclosed quality to the air, definitely not a journey for the claustrophobic or for anyone particularly fond of an uninterrupted supply of fresh oxygen. Wallace recounted that on this specific day in this singular, never-forgotten memory, he was out for a walk with his father. It wasn't presented as a grand planned outing, just a stroll, in a part of London that was by Wallace's adult recollection looking back perfectly unremarkable. You picture it based on his description, rows and rows of standard brownstone or brick houses. Neat front gardens, perhaps, if it was a slightly more respectable district. Wrought iron railings marking off small territories. The kind of street Wallace implied that you would pass 1,000 times in your life without ever giving it a second look. Generic, utterly predictable, safely, perhaps boringly ordinary. Except on this particular walk, on this specific day. Young Stephen's eyes, seeing the world from that low-down child's perspective, were suddenly drawn to something utterly unlike everything else on the street, something that violently interrupted the rhythm of the mundane. There, interrupting the predictable sequence of fences and front steps and bay windows, was a wall. Not just any wall. This wall was high, seamlessly white, made of smooth stone perhaps, or stucco rendered so perfectly it looked like a single unbroken surface, unstained, clean, pristine. In a city perpetually veiled, particularly in that industrializing era, in a film of soot and dust. A straightforward, undeniable historical fact for you right there. Industrialization literally made London's air thick and grubby. A clean, perfectly white wall would have stood out like a misplaced iceberg dropped onto a pavement. It would have been startlingly, almost jarringly pure. This wall ran for a considerable length. Broad. Substantial. It was bordered by nothing but the pavement where they walked. It didn't seem to enclose anything familiar. There was no grand house peeking over the top, no glimpse of an obvious garden or park beyond it. It just was. A white wall, silent, imposing simply by virtue of its difference, and entirely undeniably incongruous with the surrounding dingy urban environment. You can practically feel with your imaginary child fingers the roughness of the standard London brick on the adjacent buildings, and then picture with a startling contrast the smooth, cool surface of that asterisk white wall. It demanded attention by refusing to conform. And in this wall, there was a door that by all appearances of reality and probability simply should not have been there. Wallace didn't describe it as grand or imposing, not like a castle gate or a church portal. Instead, he described it as small, low even, perhaps just the right size, a little inviting size for a child, and it was green, not a drab ordinary green, a soft, inviting green, almost luminous against the severe, clean white of the wall, a color that seemed to hold a light within it or drink in the available daylight and reflect it back gently. It had no visible lock that he remembered, no handle, just a smooth, flat surface, yet it seemed utterly and profoundly to beckon, to call him closer. Around it, Wallace said, were the leaves of a creeper plant. Not a scraggly vine, but a vibrant, almost impossibly rich green foliage. It framed the door like an organic archway clinging delicately to the surface of the wall without seeming to cover it, accentuating the green of the door rather than obscuring it. The overall impression was one of purity, unexpected beauty almost jarring in its setting, and a profound magnetic secrecy. It wasn't threatening, not scary, it was enchanting, utterly captivating, like stumbling on a grim, cracked pavement upon a single perfect rose, inexplicably blooming in vibrant color. You know that feeling, that flash of finding intense beauty or wonder in a place you absolutely didn't expect it. Like that time maybe you were hurrying down some slightly dodgy-looking alleyway, you know, the sort bit questionable smells, and you unexpectedly found a surprisingly good little coffee shop pouring magic from a hidden window. Yeah, kinda like that. Except, you know, less caffeinated. And more existentially confusing, especially to a 5-year-old's burgeoning mind. Young Stephen Innes Wallace, small as he was, stopped dead in his tracks. London rushed on around him, carts rattling, voices calling, life unfolding with its predictable energy. But for him, time seemed to pause, fixated on that vision. He remembers pointing at the wall, at the door, pulling at his father's hand with sudden urgent strength. He asked about the door. An onslaught of questions probably tumbling out in that breathless way only a 5-year-old can manage when confronted with something wondrous. What was beyond it? What lay on the other side? Could he go inside? Please, could he? His father, a figure of the pragmatic world, focused presumably on the ordinary matters of a walk. Didn't seem Wallace recalled to even register what his son was pointing at. Or perhaps he registered asterisk a asterisk wall asterisk a asterisk section of street but didn't see asterisk that asterisk wall asterisk that asterisk door. He simply tugged gently, patiently, perhaps a little preoccupied, urging young Stephen to keep moving. Keep up. Back onto the path of their predetermined walk. Wallace didn't specify if his father couldn't see the door asterisk at all asterisk, or if he saw asterisk something asterisk, but dismissed it instantly as an ordinary, unremarkable detail of the urban landscape. But the effect was the same. He wasn't interested. He wasn't seeing asterisk what asterisk the child was seeing. And this is where interpretation opens up, where historians trying to piece together objective accounts of a period, and psychologists trying to understand memory perception and the child's developing mind might argue endlessly. Were the door and wall truly there physically for just a fleeting moment, accessible to certain sensibilities or at certain rare junctures? Were they, as some psychologists might suggest today, a complex, intense hallucination, unique to Wallace, a physical manifestation of a child's innate, profound longing for escape, for wonder, for something beyond the bounds of their limited, ordered reality? Or maybe they were briefly, transiently, objectively there, only perceivable by some complex interplay of external factors and internal states, who knows? It's enough you reflect to make you scratch your head looking around your own mundane room right now. Are there such hidden doorways? Subtle tears in the fabric of the everyday? Do we as adults simply train our eyes, our senses only to see the mundane, the sensible, the explicable, effectively blinding ourselves to the extraordinary, like walking past a drain cover 100 times and never noticing the intricate pattern on it? Or ignoring that slightly peculiar smell in London? Well, it's London, everything smells a bit peculiar, just move along. We filter out the anomaly in favor of the expected. Did Wallace's father simply filter out the impossibility of the clean white wall and the green door? Wallace himself, in recounting the story, insisted it was real, tangibly real. He vividly recalled not just the sight, but the overwhelming asterisk sensation asterisk that flooded him in that moment. A sensation of pure, unadulterated longing, curiosity, an instinctive recognition that this place, this door, was meant for him, an invitation whispered directly and solely to his young open ears. He remembers trying to pull away from his father, wanting desperately with all the urgent might of a small child's will to touch that green door, to see if it would open under his touch, to step through. His small heart must have hammered in his chest, a mix of fierce excitement at the potential of what lay beyond and mounting frustration at the obstacle, the sheer inability to go forward represented by his father's kind but firm, redirected hand. And so you hear young Stephen Wallace, still clinging to his father's hand, was led away from the threshold, away from the pull of the improbable white wall and the enchanting green door. He looked back as children do, watching it recede, the vision etching itself indelibly into his mind. A bright glowing ember of potential wonder tucked away into the ordinary pocket of his young consciousness. He didn't go through that day. He was steered back onto the familiar sensible path, away. But the vision, the vision stayed. It didn't fade like a transient thought. It pulsed. It shimmered. It held the undeniable promise that one day he would return. He had asterisk to return. And he would see what lay beyond that peculiar magnetic enchanting door in the clean white wall. That single fleeting encounter became the defining moment of his childhood, Wallace recounted, a silent internal benchmark against which all future experiences in the conventional world, no matter how successful, how acclaimed, how full of apparent joy, would somehow be measured. A perfect thing against which all other things felt slightly less than. So, that first time, young Stephen Wallace was gently but firmly pulled away, leaving the enigmatic green door and its impossibly clean white wall behind him. They receded from sight in the physical street, only to become an increasingly vivid, perhaps even tormenting image burned into his developing mind. The yearning it ignited, however, didn't fade, not one bit. It persisted, like a tenacious little earworm tune you hear once and then just can't shake, replaying in your head at odd moments. The image of that white wall, of that green door, recurred in his thoughts. He didn't immediately begin to actively search for it in a systematic way like an adult trying to find a specific address using a street plan. He was, after all, only 5 or maybe 6 years old. Life as a 5-year-old isn't structured around planned expeditions or determined quests, not usually. It's more about where the next interesting pebble catches your eye, or which way a bright butterfly flits, or what small patch of sun feels warmest to sit in. His days were filled, as was typical for a child of his class in that era, with governess lessons, which, let's be honest, probably felt about as exciting and stimulating as watching paint dry, particularly when compared to the incandescent, impossible reality of a magical doorway. Governess lessons were about facts, dates, proper penmanship, and the diligent memorization required for polite society. Then there was approved playtime, in carefully curated nurseries, or perhaps in a nearby square designated as safe and respectable. Child's play in upper-class Victorian or Edwardian homes was often much more structured and supervised than the free-ranging, slightly grubby adventures you might imagine. Think structured activities, strict attention to proper behavior, and absolutely under no circumstances running with scissors. Unless, of course, the scissors were specifically designated as running scissors, which, let's face it, is highly improbable. But sometimes, just sometimes, when he was out for another walk, perhaps lagging slightly behind an attendant lost in thought about a cloud shape or a pattern in the pavement, or maybe venturing just slightly ahead propelled by some transient childhood urge, it would just appear again. A sudden flicker in the visual landscape, the clean white wall, unmissable against the drabness, the inviting green door. It wasn't that he was consciously looking for it, actively scanning street numbers or landmarks. Not in the way an adult searches. It was more like an instinct, a sudden magnetic pull, a noticing out of the very corner of his eye. Something just clicked, drawing his attention like a compass needle snapping towards true north. Wallace recounted several such brief, incredibly frustrating reappearances during his early childhood. Moments where the white wall and green door would shimmer seemingly into existence on a street. There it was. But then, it was only for a moment. Quickly rendered inaccessible, because he was being hurried along. His father's stride was too long, the governess too focused on reaching their destination. Or he was distracted by another demand from the adult accompanying him. Or simply couldn't, with all his impassioned pointing and pleading, convince the adult to stop. To pause. To simply look. It felt, he recalled, like trying to grab smoke, or a fleeting shadow. The reality of it, the vivid, undeniable presence of that other place would be tantalizingly available for just a second. A heartbeat. A breath. And then, gone. Reabsorbed back into the mundane flow of the city, leaving him with that familiar pang of yearning and the fresh sting of thwarted desire. Each of these failed re-encounters reinforced the extraordinary, almost elusive nature of the doorway. It wasn't reliably there, it appeared. But when and under what conditions was a profound mystery to his young mind. Until one day, he remembered a sunny day, which itself felt a little unusual for London, where a gray drizzle or a perpetual damp mist often seemed to be the default atmospheric setting. But the sun was out, illuminating the world in a way that felt clearer, more promising. He was alone this time, or at least allowed a small, measured measure of unsupervised exploration. Perhaps in a specifically sanctioned, safe-seeming park or a quiet, enclosed square. He was a little hazy looking back as an adult on the exact circumstances of how he came to be unaccompanied on this particular occasion. Was he supposed to meet someone? Was the attendant delayed? The details were lost to the mists of time and the overwhelming nature of the event. But the fact remained crystal clear: he was by himself. And he saw it. The clean white wall. He saw the inviting green door. And this time, this singular time, there was nothing, no one, to pull him away. He didn't hesitate. The hesitation, the adult calculation of risk, the assessment of consequences, these complex considerations simply weren't present in his child's mind in that moment. There was just the powerful, undeniable pull, the potent memory of the longing from that first glimpse, the vivid, intoxicating contrast between the promise held within that door and the dull, gray predictability of the world around him, and the opportunity. He walked towards it, deliberately. Every step felt significant. The wall felt cool under his small hand as he reached it, smooth, completely unlike the gritty, rough texture of standard London brickwork he was used to. It was clean, pure. He remembers the door. Was it slightly ajar when he reached it? Or did it perhaps open softly just as he approached, sensing his arrival, his intent? Again he said the precise details here were blurred, smudged slightly by the sheer, overwhelming nature of the moment, by the intensity of the emotions. But the sensation of stepping through, that was crystal clear, unforgettable, undeniable. It wasn't a simple step. Not just putting one foot over a low piece of wood marking a threshold. It felt like stepping from one asterisk frequency asterisk of existence into another. You feel the sharp, crisp, ordinary London air, maybe carrying faint echoes of distant traffic, the call of a hawker, the murmur of voices, that pervasive scent of coal smoke and dampness. And suddenly that sensation is gone, completely replaced by air that was soft, fragrant, and utterly silent. Save for sounds that felt right, natural. The visual noise of the street vanished. Gone were the cluttered facades, the railings, the lampposts, the distracting variety of the urban environment. Evaporated, replaced by something else entirely. Something that unfolded around him with a profound sense of welcome and rightness. Stepping through that low green door felt less like passing over a physical barrier and more like passing into a waking dream. Or rather, out of the often drab dream of mundane reality and into something true and vibrant. The threshold itself felt seamless. No jarring step up or down, no catching your foot. One moment his small boots were on the dusty, hard paving stones of London. The very next moment, he was standing on something soft and yielding underfoot. Wallace described this initial sensation on the other side as one of profound peace and overwhelming delight, utter pure joy. Gone were the straight, rigid lines and sharp angles of the city. Here everything curved, everything flowed, felt organic, gentle, like stepping from a narrow, cramped, noisy corridor and emerging suddenly into a vast, sunlit space. But instead of feeling exposed or overwhelmed, you felt enveloped, embraced, welcomed entirely. You weren't just asterisk and asterisk a place, you were asterisk part asterisk of it immediately. You realize as you absorb his description, in a garden, but not a garden like any you have ever seen documented in polite society. Certainly not one of the meticulously manicured, rigidly planned Victorian landscapes with their geometrically precise flower beds, their stern, anthropomorphized topiary animals standing like silent sentinels, their gravel paths raked to unnatural perfection. This was wilder, more organic, and profoundly, undeniably magical. Yet for all its wildness, it felt entirely benign, utterly safe. The air inside this garden, it was different, thick, laden with scent. Not just one or two distinct floral perfumes, but a complex, layered fragrance. It was sweet, yes, but also deeply earthy. It had notes he couldn't identify from any flower he knew. A fragrance that was both intensely calming and utterly invigorating all at once. You could almost taste the clean air after London's perpetual grit and chemical tang. It filled your lungs with a kind of vibrant nourishment. Imagine breathing in that perfect, pure, cool scent after a sudden warm spring shower when the earth is damp and the blossoms release their perfumes, but multiply that perfection by 100. That's closer. The dominant color wasn't just green, interestingly enough. It felt like a tapestry woven from every single conceivable hue of blooming plant imaginable. Bright, almost aggressive reds, deep, mysterious purples, shimmering liquid blues, impossible luminous yellows, colors that seemed less like pigments applied to petals and more like light made visible, solidifying into floral forms. Colors that felt more vibrant, more real asterisk than reality as he knew it. Imagine colors so red they seemed to burn with an internal fire. Blues so deep they held the quiet memory of a twilight sky just before the stars come out. And whites so pure they almost ached with their own brightness. This wasn't just asterisk color asterisk in the visual sense. It was pure light manifesting in botanical form. As you ventured tentatively, perhaps at first, into this new landscape, the sounds unfolded around you. Not gradually, immediately. The distant clamor of the city, the cartwheels, the hawkers' cries, the human voices, the mechanical rumbles, completely vanished the moment he stepped through the door. It was as if that other world had its own hermetic silent boundary. Here silence wasn't an absence, it wasn't empty. It was full, populated by the most exquisite natural music imaginable. Birds flitted among trees. He didn't recognize trees with leaves of unusual shapes and colors, their very bark seeming to possess a quality that wasn't quite wood as he knew it. The birds' plumage was brilliant, impossible colors, far exceeding the common sparrows or pigeons of London. And they didn't just chirp, they sang songs. Melodies that felt ancient, complex, utterly unique, and deeply undeniably joyous. There was the soft, resonant drone of large, gentle bees, busy and purposeful among the immense, colorful flowers, their buzzing a low, lulling counterpoint to the other sounds, and always the murmur of water. Not the functional gurgle of a drainpipe or the roar of the Thames, but the quiet, gentle trickling of streams, or small fountains bubbling with liquid light. A constant, soothing melody that underpinned the whole experience, creating a feeling of flowing, constant life. You weren't hearing these things as isolated noises like items in a catalog. You were hearing them as parts of a living, breathing soundscape, utterly harmonious. Every element belonged, every sound felt necessary and beautiful. And everywhere he looked, everywhere he moved, surrounding him, protecting him perhaps with their very presence, were these impossibly kind, impossibly beautiful beings. They manifested as both people and animals. We'll delve a little more into what they were like later as Wallace described them. But the immediate impression flooding his young mind and senses was one of overwhelming friendliness, a palpable sense of acceptance, an environment utterly, completely, blessedly devoid of threat or hurry. It was, he recognized even as a child in some fundamental way, the antithesis of his own daily life in London, which while comfortable and privileged was structured, governed by rules, often isolating despite being surrounded by people, by attendants and teachers. Here in this garden, curiosity wasn't met with a sharp "don't touch" or a weary "stand still, dear." Here curiosity felt like an implicit invitation, an invitation to explore, to marvel, to simply be. It felt like coming home. Not a physical dwelling, but a spiritual one. A profound recognition in his young soul that this place was profoundly, utterly, unequivocally right, where he belonged. It's like that feeling you get after a really long, exhausting day. You walk into your home, you close the door on the world, and you finally settle into bed, pulling the covers up, that perfect alignment of comfort, of place, that exhale you didn't realize you'd been holding all day. Ah, that feeling, pure bliss, distilled. Only this wasn't a bedroom, this was a magical garden, and he was just standing there, a small child from London, miles and miles away by any earthly map's measure. But right here, right in the heart of wherever this was, stepping across that threshold, it wasn't just a change of location, it was a profound, immediate transformation of atmosphere. The instant he was through the green door, that relentless gray press of London air, heavy with grit and soot and distant human clamor, was gone, replaced by something indescribably soft, vibrant, alive. It was, Wallace remembered it later, less like entering a place you walked into, and more like entering a feeling, a pervasive state of being. You breathe deeply now, standing just inside, and the air tastes different. It's not just clean as you know clean air in the outside world, it's sweeter, lighter. It felt alive. As his young lungs filled, it wasn't just oxygen he was taking in, it was a fragrant richness. The complex, layered scent of blossoms he'd never seen, never smelled before. Mingling with the clean, damp earth, the kind of smell that rises after a perfect spring shower, only multiplied, intensified, layered with fragrances he didn't have words for, but which resonated deep inside him. It wasn't overpowering, this scentscape, but it was deeply comforting. It wrapped around him like a gentle embrace, like a soft shawl made of fragrance and pure light. The sights that met his child's eyes were overwhelming in their sheer, impossible beauty, yet they were never, not for a moment, frightening. His gaze fell upon expanses of lush greenery, greenery utterly unlike any grass or shrubbery you'd seen cultivated in polite society's parks, or the carefully tended squares near his home. This green seemed to hum with an inner vitality, a vibrancy that suggested profound health and life. And weaving through this vibrant greenery were borders, or perhaps simply asterisk occurrences, asterisk of plants overflowing with flowers, flowers of impossible size and brilliance. They weren't neatly regimented beds tucked into precise shapes like embroidered patterns. They grew with a kind of glorious, unrestrained wildness. Yet it wasn't chaotic. It felt deliberate, artfully wild. Think roses the size of your head, their petals perfectly formed, velvety and rich. Lilies with petals like translucent stained glass catching the light and diffusing it in rainbow hues. Blossoms whose shapes and colors defied description, twisting into geometries unknown to earthly botany, or possessing colors that seemed to shift and pulse as you watched them, creating a living kaleidoscope that shimmered and pulsed with contained light. A garden so vibrant it made those carefully tended prize-winning specimens proudly displayed at horticultural shows in the outside world look positively muted, apologetic, almost drab by comparison. Imagine flowers so red they seemed to burn with internal light, a searing, intense scarlet. Blues so deep they held the memory of a perfect twilight sky, bottomless and infinite. And whites so pure, so intensely bright they almost ached to look at them vibrating with light. This wasn't just asterisk color asterisk. This felt like pure light distilled, concentrated and manifesting as vibrant plant life. Every petal seemed to be its own source of gentle illumination. As he ventured slowly, perhaps at first drawn deeper into this new landscape, the sounds unfolded further. They didn't erupt, they presented themselves. Gone utterly was the city's relentless clamor, the distant rumble of trains, the calls of vendors, the clip-clop of horses. Here that soundscape was extinguished. Here the silence wasn't an absence of sound. It was full, populated by the most exquisite natural music. Birds, yes, still. But birds of plumage so brilliant, colors almost impossible, flitted among trees you didn't recognize, trees that didn't fit into any known botanical classification. And their songs not chirping, complex melodies that felt ancient, composed, deliberate, joyful in a way that seemed pure, untroubled. Entirely unlike the frantic peeping of sparrows or the mundane cooing of pigeons he knew. There was the soft drone of large, gentle bees, bigger somehow than the bees he knew, busy among the immense fragrant flowers. Their low, steady buzz was a lulling, comforting counterpoint to the higher bird song and other sounds, and always beneath it all was the murmur of water, constant, soothing. Not a crashing roar or a rushing torrent, but the quiet, liquid whisper of streams. The soft, gentle trickle of water features. Fountains that seemed made of light as much as water pools so clear they reflected the impossible sky above perfectly. This soundscape wasn't a collection of isolated noises. It was a living, breathing, utterly harmonious symphony. Every element belonged, every sound added to the pervasive feeling of peace and vibrant life. It was nature composing itself perfectly. And the creatures? Ah, the creatures. This perhaps was the most enchanting part for a child newly arrived in this space. Everywhere Wallace looked there were animals, utterly, completely unafraid. They moved about with an innate dignity and effortless grace. Deer he remembered specifically, white and sleek. They weren't startled by his presence. They allowed him to approach, allowed him to stroke their soft velvety noses without flinching or retreating. Creatures he could only describe as large, gentle cats, perhaps resembling panthers but moving with the easy grace of domestic tabbies, purring softly near the paths he trod. Brightly colored birds that would alight on his shoulder, their weight a tiny presence, their eyes like polished beads regarding him with calm, curious, unafraid eyes. These weren't zoo animals penned and displaying trained behaviors or fear. They seemed to possess an intelligence, a quiet understanding. They met his child's gaze not with wariness but with eyes full of acceptance, and a kind of serene knowing. It felt less like interacting with wild animals and more like meeting companions you simply hadn't known existed before. One quirky detail he remembered vividly was seeing what he could only describe as a sort of fluffy white creatures. They weren't lambs exactly, but they bounced and played with the same simple, boundless energy and innocence as lambs do. They made a soft, contented sound, a gentle, continuous murmur. They seemed in their fluffy, bouncy presence the very embodiment of innocence and uncomplicated joy. It's a charming, slightly weird image, isn't it? Like a peaceful convention of incredibly well-behaved, fluffy dust bunnies decided to come to life and just play contentedly. You walk further drawn by a gentle path. It doesn't seem carved by humans but woven naturally into the landscape, covered perhaps in moss, or the soft petals shed by the immense flowers. It seems to invite you softly deeper into this wonderland. Wallace recalled there were other children there too. Not many, but they moved about with the same sense of quiet joy and effortless freedom he was beginning to feel. They weren't organized into playgroups. They were playing games that seemed entirely spontaneous, without rules, without winners, just simple shared expressions of pure delight in their environment. rolling down gentle grassy slopes with soft, unidentifiable creatures, or chasing beams of light that shimmered through the trees. And there were people, adults, he thought, moving among the children and animals with an air of immense kindness and wisdom. They weren't busy, their movements were unhurried. They smiled. Their smiles felt incredibly genuine, radiating a deep internal contentment. They spoke softly, though their words weren't immediately understandable to his child's ear. Their gestures were gentle. There was no urgency here, no demands placed upon you, no expectations. You were simply invited to explore, to enjoy, to simply be asterisk. Imagine for a child used to the structured life of a polite Edwardian household, being told what to do, where to go, how to sit, when to speak, who to speak to, how to speak properly. The absolute liberation of this place. Here freedom wasn't just an absence of constraint. It felt like the natural state of existence itself. The air you breathed felt like freedom. The ground you walked on felt like freedom. The presence of others felt like freedom. There seemed to be structures, too, woven into the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. Open pavilions, perhaps, or archways draped heavily with flowering vines blending seamlessly into the abundant plant life. Places that offered shade, or a quiet view across the flowing terrain, blending so utterly with the natural world they seemed almost to have grown there. He recalled one building specifically, perhaps faced with marble, but marble that seemed to subtly shift in color as you looked at it, perhaps from soft pinks to dove grays, its surface catching the light in impossible ways, somehow complementing perfectly the vibrant, chaotic beauty of the garden around it. This hint of architecture suggests an ordered element within the apparent wildness of the garden, but it was clearly a different kind of order. Not the rigid mathematical order of city streets or structured landscapes, more like an order based on harmony, on organic flow, entirely unlike the rigid grid of London's expanding street plan. This wasn't utilitarian construction. It was building integrated with beauty, serving some purpose of quiet gathering or reflection, but looking less like a structure made by tools and more like a natural outcropping of shimmering stone. Historians might point to certain ancient civilizations built less for defense or function, and more for aesthetic or spiritual connection, debating whether this garden reflects such a lost approach. Wallace was experiencing it not as a theoretical possibility from the past, but as a vibrant present reality. And the light itself, it was unlike any daylight he knew. It wasn't the harsh glare of the city, that sharp, often uncomfortable brightness on a clear day, or London's pervasive low-hanging shadow. Here the light seemed softer, diffused, as if originating everywhere at once or filtering down through unseen layers of air. It bathed everything, the plants, the animals, the people himself, in a luminous, gentle glow, a light that made every color seem to sing with internal brightness. Every shadow felt like a friendly, soft hush, not a dark, concealing threat. It wasn't harsh enough to make you squint even looking at the impossibly bright flowers. Yet paradoxically, it revealed everything with incredible clarity, highlighting textures and details in a way conventional light didn't. It was, you feel, as Wallace described it, the light of pure well-being. Imagine waking up on the perfect summer morning feeling utterly rested, the sun coming in through your window, but feeling only warmth and brightness, no harshness. It was that feeling made manifest as light covering an entire landscape. In that light, surrounded by beauty, harmony, and a profound sense of acceptance, little Stephen Wallace felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. Not just that he was allowed to be there, but that he belonged there. Fundamentally, it was an exquisite, if ultimately temporary, immersion into a realm where everything simply worked, beautifully, effortlessly, naturally. Utterly unlike the complex, often baffling mechanics of the outside world he was only just beginning to learn about. A world where seemingly unremarkable streets could astonishingly conceal this, a realm of perfect order and effortless grace waiting just beyond a low green door. Beyond the flowers and the general harmonious beauty, Wallace specifically encountered the inhabitants, the beings that populated this garden. He spoke, as I mentioned, of tall, graceful people. They moved with a slow, serene pace and radiated a palpable sense of calm and welcome. They didn't communicate with him using words, not words that his 5-year-old mind understood, or perhaps any words at all. But he felt that he knew their thoughts, their feelings. He understood their gentle acceptance of him. It wasn't a communication through spoken language, but something deeper, more fundamental, perhaps telepathic in nature. or simply the direct transference of emotion and meaning unobstructed by the clumsiness of vocabulary or syntax. Some sat quietly reading, though their texts were not like any books he knew. Others moved slowly, purposefully among the plants and animals, an air of peaceful custodianship about them. They weren't overseers imposing order. They seemed to be simply tending to the natural, harmonious existence of the garden. They didn't question him. They didn't demand anything. They simply were asterisk with him. Their presence was comforting, warm. And the animals, Wallace recounted, encountering creatures with a particular kind of joy. They were not confined behind bars or fences. They wandered freely, moved with an easy grace that spoke of absolute comfort and safety within their environment. They showed absolutely no fear of him, the strange little bipedal newcomer. Gentle herbivores, deer-like creatures with luminous eyes grazed peacefully nearby. Birds of unimaginable plumage fluttered among branches he couldn't name, singing melodies that sounded composed, intricate, perfect. Other animals, entirely unique creatures he'd never seen in pictures or stories. Friendly beings with soft fur or strange, beautiful scales would approach him with open curiosity. He remembered one specifically, like a small deer, but its antlers seemed to glow faintly with a soft internal light. And another creature that was vaguely like a domestic cat, but larger, moving with the fluid strength of a panther, and its fur was the color of liquid gold. They weren't dangerous. They felt like companions, playful, extending a silent, undeniable invitation to engage. It really is like walking into the world's most incredibly friendly petting zoo, but where the animals actively approach you with tail wags or the equivalent and gentle nudges. Much more engaging, if perhaps wildly fantastical by the standards of, say, Regent's Park. There was an element of play, yes. As mentioned, he saw other children running and laughing with these creatures that would be considered dangerous or impossible in the outside world. Lions acting like playful cubs. Creatures like the golden cat nudging a child to roll down a gentle grassy slope, utterly free of fear. This place, he recalled, felt like the Garden of Eden, perhaps. Before the serpent showed up and the apple got things complicated. A fleeting, slightly weird thought occurred to you. Did these creatures perhaps have some truly peculiar uses for things in this perfect garden? Like, say, crocodile dung sunscreen for perfect hide health? Probably not. Everything seemed so inherently pure, so untouched by external need for manufactured solutions. Everything felt just right asterisk. And these beings, both the human-like figures and the sentient-seeming animals, seemed to watch over the garden. Not guarding it fiercely against intruders, but simply tending to its perpetual state of harmonious existence, like patient gardeners of a cosmos. He didn't engage in complex conversations. His language as a 5-year-old was limited anyway, and as mentioned, their communication wasn't based on words. The connection felt deeper. They seemed to understand him completely, without him needing to articulate his wonder, or his shy joy at being accepted so easily. They just knew. They would offer him sometimes delicious, strange fruits he'd never seen, that tasted like sunshine, and sweetness distilled, like pure happiness in solid, edible form, and drinks that were cool and utterly refreshing. They seemed to make him feel even lighter, happier, more integrated into the place. You're probably thinking, understandably, mysterious fruits from an unknown dimension? Not exactly something health and safety committees would approve of. And yeah, probably not something you'd want to sample at a dodgy roadside stand back in conventional London. But in this context, in this place of pure good and inherent rightness, they felt utterly safe, nourishing at a level beyond the physical. He wandered for what felt like an age, an immeasurable period. There was no sense of time passing in the way he understood it from the outside world. The sun seemed to hang perpetually in that golden sky. The light didn't noticeably shift from dawn to noon to dusk. It simply was, a constant state of luminous day. He played with the animals, receiving gentle nudges, soft licks from furred faces, contacts that felt entirely comforting, safe, loved even. He walked with the quiet kind people, holding their hands, feeling a connection that transcended words and any conventional relationship he understood. He saw breathtaking vistas unfold within the garden's seemingly contained space. Clear pools so still you could see every smooth, colorful pebble on the bottom and a perfect reflection of the luminous sky and foliage. Groves of trees unlike any he'd ever imagined, their bark like polished metal, their leaves rustling with unheard melodies. Paths that wound away into gentle slopes overlooking flowering valleys, riots of impossible color cascading down soft hillsides. It wasn't just a garden, you realize, as your friend describes his account. It felt like an entire, complete small world. Contained, perfect, untroubled. A realm where reality functioned according to different laws focused on beauty and harmony, rather than struggle and progress. Historians might suggest this perfect realm reflects the common archetypes found in folklore and mythology across countless cultures, from Edenic myths of perfect beginnings to Arthurian legends of hidden enchanted realms, perhaps hinting at a universal human longing for a pure, untroubled existence, an escape from the complexity and pain of the known world. These beings, both human-like and animal-like, with their calm acceptance and watchful presence, felt like inherent parts of this untroubled state, guarding or simply embodying its essence. Wallace was utterly convinced. This was a place he went to, a physical, though otherworldly reality, not merely a construct of his child's overactive imagination in his mind. And as you absorb his memory of it, the conviction in his voice as relayed by your friend, you find yourself wondering too. Could such a place exist, not mapped, not known to the world? Accessible only to certain people, or perhaps only at certain rare fleeting moments triggered by circumstances or chance? What if those seemingly solid, impermeable walls of ordinary reality were just a suggestion, a state we largely agree to perceive, but which has secret seams, hidden entrances for those sensitive enough or lucky enough to find them? You've been in the garden, through Wallace's eyes. You've felt the impossible peace that permeated its air. You've tasted vicariously the sweetness of its vibrant fruit, heard the perfect harmonious sounds of its birdsong and rustling life. Time seemed, as I said, to have no dominion there. He wandered, played. Simply was asterisk, for a duration that defied earthly clocks. Was it hours, minutes, weeks? His memory didn't provide an answer because the asterisk feeling asterisk of time didn't apply. It was pure immersion, complete acceptance. A perfect state of being that felt paradoxically as natural as breathing, the way he was perhaps meant to exist, yet infinitely more precious, fragile, because he knew it lay outside his usual grasp. And then, Wallace recalled, that perfect immersion began, subtly, cruelly, to break. It didn't end with violence or a sudden jarring expulsion, but with a creeping quiet awareness of elsewhere. You're sitting by a quiet pool in the garden. Imagine trailing your fingers through the impossibly clear water. The surface holds reflections of the luminous sky and vibrant plants that feel somehow brighter, sharper, more intensely than even the reality they mirrored. And as you do this, absorbed in the gentle wonder, a quiet thought arises. A thought that doesn't belong to the garden, but to another place, the place you came from. It wasn't, he said, like a distinct call, not a voice summoning him back, but an internal nudge, a growing sense settling over him that this idyllic state was temporary. This perfect bubble was beginning to thin. It felt like the slow approach of evening after the most perfect summer day imaginable. The light is still golden, still beautiful, but holding within its quality the inevitable melancholy hint of approaching night. A gentle fading towards conclusion. He didn't want to leave, of course. Why on earth would why would you ever, faced with sunlit freedom and effortless joy, choose the grayness of confinement and conventional pressures? His child's mind, unburdened by duty, uncomplicated by appointments or the urgent need to check correspondence or maintain a schedule, wanted only one thing: to stay forever. Build a small, simple house woven into the bark of a glowing tree. Live on sweet fruit and the warmth of kind smiles and animal nudges. Yes, that sounded about right. Sign him up for eternal garden residency. Please and thank you very much. But the feeling persisted. Quiet. Inexorable. A sense of gravity perhaps asserting itself. Not physical gravity, but the metaphorical weight of the world he had left behind. Wallace felt a growing impulse, a gentle but firm urge to return, to go back through the way he had come. Maybe one of the kind, serene people from the garden came near him, not speaking words, but their presence communicating the message. Their expression, though still gentle and kind, perhaps held a quiet sadness, a knowing melancholy. They didn't push him, didn't force him towards the door, but their presence, their subtle energy communicated the undeniable fact that this visit, this beautiful immersion, was reaching its natural conclusion. The flow of experience was shifting. You might have been gently led towards the green door again by one of those kind, non-speaking figures. Or perhaps you simply found yourself drifting back towards it almost involuntarily, like a leaf drawn back towards its root system after a long flight. It felt, Wallace described, like waking softly from the most wonderful dream imaginable. There is, yes, the sorrow, the quiet grief that the dream is ending, but the lingering sweetness of the memory, still vivid and potent, makes the waking world just a little bit more bearable, at least for a moment. You approach the door again, this unassuming doorway in the seamless white wall, now seeing it this time from the inside of the garden. From this perspective, perhaps it seemed even more humble. A plain, low wooden door, set into that wall, covered in the luminous green creeper, framing it like an invitation that was also a farewell. A simple solitary frame standing between boundless magic and elsewhere. There was a pause, a held breath, a moment for a final look back, at the sun-drenched slopes receding into the garden's perfect distance, the impossibly vibrant flowers seemingly pulsing with light even now, the peaceful animals, some grazing, some lying contentedly regarding you with those intelligent, kind eyes. You might have instinctively raised a small hand to wave goodbye to one of the gentle people, or shared a final silent moment of understanding with one of the fluffy creatures that bounded by. This goodbye, Wallace remembered, felt intensely personal, and it was laced with the poignant, bittersweet knowledge that you were consciously now turning away from something utterly precious, turning back towards a known, less luminous reality. And then, with that pervasive sense of rightness and sadness, knowing it was time, knowing this moment had reached its natural culmination, you stepped through. The instant Wallace crossed the threshold back into the ordinary street, the world, the other world, snapped back into focus. Harsh, jarring, disorienting. Imagine stepping from a warm bath, sinking into utter comfort and warmth, and suddenly finding yourself plunged naked into an icy gray blizzard. The air outside the door felt instantly cold, thick, gritty on his tongue and his nostrils. The vibrant, impossible colors of the garden vanished, snuffed out as if a light had been switched off, replaced by the drab browns, the dull reds, the perpetual gray of London brickwork, stained by industrial soot thick on every surface, a quintessential, undeniable marker of that historical era's rapid industrial expansion, a time when countless factory chimneys poured pollutants into the atmosphere without regulation, visibly changing the urban landscape, coating everything in a dull film. The sounds returned, but not as a gentle awakening, not as a melody easing back into audibility, but as an assault, a cacophony. The immediate loud clatter of a passing cart on the cobbles felt deafening, the distant harsh shout of a hawker advertising wares, the omnipresent low roar of the city, the ceaseless rumble of unseen traffic activity machines, the soft, natural sounds of the garden, the bird song, the water, the animal movements, were utterly extinguished, replaced by a jarring collection of mechanical and human noise that suddenly felt raw, unpleasant. You could almost feel the invisible film of city grime settling on your skin and in your lungs again, after the perfect, fragrant purity of the garden air. Talk about a buzzkill. A total soul-crushing re-entry into the less than ideal. He found himself standing on the familiar hard paving stones of the street, facing just a wall. It was the same stretch of wall. He knew it. The same part of the street where he had left it seemingly only moments before. But it no longer seemed white and luminous. It was just a wall, plain, solid, utterly devastatingly ordinary. And the door, the beautiful beckoning green door. It was gone. There was no green door, no framing creeper, just a plain stretch of brick or stone, matching the rest of the street. Seamless, solid, unbroken, utterly denying entry. It was as if the entire magical interlude, the boundless space he had just inhabited, had been swallowed whole by the aggressive, demanding reality of the mundane city. For a child who had just experienced utter magic, total acceptance, profound joy, this felt like the most profound betrayal imaginable. You can almost feel his small, returned heart plummeting into his gut. One moment swimming weightless in a sea of wonders, breathing liquid light. The next standing ankle-deep in disappointment puddles on a grim, dirty street. But Stephen Innes Wallace carried something back with him across that vanished threshold. Not physical souvenirs, of course. Though imagine if he could have somehow smuggled back a piece of that luminous fruit, its sweetness tangible in his pocket back in London, or a single softly glowing feather from one of those radiant birds. Now the cargo he brought back was entirely intangible. but it was immensely powerful. He carried back the indelible memory, burning bright, sharp, and vibrant against the encroaching grayness of his everyday reality. A standard of comparison he would never forget, and he carried back perhaps most crucially the deep, unshakable knowledge of its existence. He had been there. He had felt it. It was real. And woven into that knowledge, into the fabric of the departure, there was a profound certainty that this place, the garden of the door in the wall, wasn't lost forever. That he could one day return. This wasn't just a fragile, hopeful thought. It felt presented to him subtly, perhaps, by the quiet look in the eyes of the kind people as he turned to leave, or a final knowing whisper carried on the rustling leaves just as he stepped back through. It was the promise, the assurance, quietly embedded in his farewell. You can come back. This is not a final ending. The access point might move, but the place is there and you are welcome. This promise, this knowledge of future potential return, it became the single shimmering lodestar of his young life. It provided a secret well of comfort and hope that nothing else in the ordinary world could replicate. It was a guarantee that even amidst the mundane requirements of schooling, governess lessons, later proper public school, the chores of learning and discipline, even amidst the demands of becoming a respectable, functional young man in a highly structured society, the possibility of transcendence, of regaining that pure, uncomplicated joy remained. It meant that no matter how gray the ordinary world became, how demanding, how complicated, how often disappointing, there was an exquisite, beautiful alternative waiting to be rediscovered, a possibility of recapturing absolute belonging and happiness. It's kind of like having the worst, most miserable, longest day imaginable. Everything went wrong, you're tired, you're fed up, you just want to disappear. And then you remember. You remember there's still leftover cake, hidden in the fridge, waiting for you. It doesn't fix everything, that cake, but knowing it's there, that moment of simple pleasure is accessible. Makes everything just a little bit more bearable. The garden was Wallace's hidden cake, promising a return to ultimate sweetness. A small, perhaps quirky tidbit that comes to mind in this era, early 20th century children's literature, right around the time H.G. Wells, who wrote the original very short story this tale is based on, was active, often explored hidden magical worlds accessed through unlikely, unassuming portals. Think of Frances Hodgson Burnett's Asterisk, the secret garden asterisk appearing suddenly in an ordinary, albeit walled landscape. Maybe there was something in the cultural air of the time, a collective unconscious yearning being reflected in the stories being told. Wallace's experience puts a deeply personal, potentially literal face on that archetype. However, while the promise of return was exhilarating, the immediate reality of the re-entry was jarring. He had to slot back into his life, account for his time, explain perhaps where he had been and why he was looking so wide-eyed, or perhaps standing perfectly still, seemingly transfixed in the street. Although in the immediate aftermath of such disorientation and intensity, he was likely unable to articulate the experience coherently, even if anyone had truly pressed him for a detailed account. It must have felt physically and emotionally like existing on two different planes at once. The gap between the boundless, effortless freedom of the garden and the structured, expectation-filled world he returned to would have been immense. How do you, as a child or later, ever adequately explain spending hours, or was it only minutes by the clock in a place of perfect harmony, when according to parental accounts or official records, you were only gone for a short time or seen lingering motionlessly near a specific wall? Psychologists who study childhood memory formation and the nature of fantastical thinking often debate this point. Do children truly misremember intense, potentially extraordinary events, confusing waking reality with vivid dreams? Or are they processing experiences that exist outside the conventional adult understanding of real, translating them through the lens of their limited understanding and language? Wallace, as I've relayed, was utterly unshakable in his conviction. The garden was unequivocally real. The door was real. He was back in the ordinary world, the dull colors, the harsh sounds, the gritty air, but he was forever marked, forever changed, by the extraordinary one, and the quest, the consuming, defining quest of his life, the quest to find that doorway again, to step back through it, to reclaim that sense of absolute belonging, to experience that pure, uncomplicated joy again. That quest began. Wallace stated the very moment the green door vanished and he saw only a solid blank wall where magic had been. It was a quest that would subtly, profoundly shape the entire rest of his life. Even as he walked the perfectly sensible, highly structured path the conventional world expected him to follow. The outer life proceeding as planned, the inner life consumed by the search for the vanished gate. So there you stand. As Wallace recalled the feeling, a small child on a perfectly ordinary London street, only moments by the outside world's ticking clocks having passed since you stepped through that miraculous green door and were immersed in wonder. The air around you feels dull flat. The colors of the street, the browns, the grays, the dull reds, seem muted, drained of vitality compared to the incandescent hues you just witnessed. The sounds are harsh, disconnected, a cacophony rather than a harmony. The brilliant, effortless world you just inhabited feels terrifyingly far away now. Almost dreamlike. Impossible if not for the intense ache of loss settling in your small chest, and the undeniable searing certainty of the memory. You were asterisk there. You touched the soft fur of gentle creatures, smelled the intoxicating luminous flowers, felt the profound peace settle over you, breathed air that felt like liquid sunshine. And now, you're back on solid, gritty, conventional ground, with nothing tangible to show for it, nothing physical brought back, nothing but the vivid, glowing memory, and an empty, unyielding stretch of wall where the magic had been. Wallace recalled the profound disappointment that followed this return, a sadness far deeper than missing a promised treat, or the passing sorrow of breaking a favorite toy. This was the sadness of losing access to paradise itself, a sense of having been granted a glimpse of heaven only to be returned unequipped to articulate it to the mundane earth. The immediate impulse naturally was to find it again, to simply turn around and look for the door he had just come out of. But it was gone. And then the next impulse to actively search for it, to revisit the place, to trace back the steps. He was still very young, 5 or maybe 6 at this point, still navigating the vast, bewildering landscape of the city mostly under adult supervision, or confined to small-known territories, the familiar routes to the park, to the schoolroom around his own respectable neighborhood. But whenever he was out moving through the city for whatever purpose, a part of his young mind was constantly subconsciously scanning. His eyes would instinctively alight on walls, searching, scanning for that improbable white expanse, for that distinctive soft green door. He wasn't looking, he realized later, in the usual places, the predictable routes he knew intimately. He knew that doorway didn't belong there. He was looking for the exception, for that disruptive, miraculous anomaly in the urban fabric. He didn't have maps, of course, not like an adult. He was a child. His searching was intuitive, guided only by that powerful internal compass that pointed relentlessly towards the memory of the extraordinary. He'd lag behind his father or his governess, his young attention fixed somewhere ahead, somewhere just around the next corner, hoping for a glimpse. The adult would perhaps gently urge him along, perhaps a little impatient, while his gaze swept ceaselessly across acres of ordinary bricks and stone. He'd try sometimes to make subtle detours, pulling gently towards a side street that felt vaguely, mysteriously promising, only to find around the corner more of the same. More ordinary London. Endless repetitions of brick terraces, wrought iron railings, and the inevitable mundane lion-shaped door knocker on countless unremarkable front doors. It's kind of like trying to find that one specific beloved shop you stumbled upon years ago in a bustling, complicated market. No map. Only a vague feeling of the area, the turn you took, the general ambiance. Frustrating doesn't even begin to cover it. You wander up and down rows that look similar but aren't quite right. Every corner you turn sparks a sudden wild flicker of hope. Maybe this is it. A hope quickly extinguished by the familiar recognition of something perfectly, depressingly normal. Oh, no, just another fruit stall. Or, wait, isn't this the place I was at 5 minutes ago? He saw many walls in the years that followed. London is, after all, a city fundamentally built on walls. Garden walls separating private green spaces from the public way. Boundary walls enclosing forgotten patches of land. Walls of immense buildings. Walls enclosing small courtyards and alleys. Some were high, some were low, some were weathered brick, some were stern stone, some plastered and painted other colors, but never, not that wall. Never the pristine, improbable, radiant white wall, with the softly beckoning green door. Sometimes a flash of white would catch his eye in the distance, maybe a newly whitewashed fence in a back alley, or a patch of bright stucco reflecting the light unexpectedly. and his small heart so vulnerable to hope would leap with a wild, unreasonable surge, only for that hope to dissolve painstakingly upon closer inspection. The texture was wrong, too rough, or too smooth in the wrong way. The surroundings weren't right, too many windows too busy, or there was simply no door. Similarly, a flash of vibrant green, perhaps a freshly painted garden gate bright against the backdrop of an ordinary wall, or a bush intensely green after a rain shower growing lushly against gray stone. This too would trigger a familiar surge of expectation, followed inevitably by the crushing disappointment when it wasn't that asterisk green, or it wasn't that asterisk wall, or the overall combination just didn't hold the faint echo, the sense of profound magic that he remembered. The contrast between the potential of that flash of color and the return to gray reality deepened the disappointment each time. Wallace recounted how this early conscious searching was largely fruitless, and with each passing month each year it became increasingly tinged with despair. It wasn't just about finding a physical door on a physical street, not entirely. It was about finding a pathway back asterisk, a tangible means to recapture that perfect, ineffable feeling of pure joy, of absolute peace, of complete, effortless belonging. Each failed attempt added a small, smooth stone to the burden he would unknowingly carry throughout his life. A quiet accretion of disappointment building upon the initial devastating loss of access. The memory of the garden, though, was still incandescently bright within him. It burned fiercely. The contrast with his mundane reality, his sensible, ordered life was stark. And the more he searched, and the less he found it, the more precious and paradoxically fragile the memory seemed. Was it truly a memory of a physical place, or was it threatening to turn into a beautiful hallucination? A comforting, elaborate lie his child brain had conjured to make the grayness more bearable. But then, just when doubt threatened to overwhelm, something would rekindle the flame, a fleeting glimpse out of a carriage window that felt vaguely familiar. A turn down a small, forgotten side street that sparked a strange sense of been here before, not in this life but in another one. A peculiar quality of light on a wall that echoed the soft, impossible luminescence he remembered from the garden. The hope never entirely died. It just changed its form, becoming less a certainty and more a flicker against the encroaching dark. The adults around him, entirely unaware of his secret consuming quest, continually reinforced the idea of a sensible, predictable world. A world you could measure, catalog, understand through facts and figures. They taught him Latin verbs and historical dates. They taught him the rules of social conduct, the proper way to address people, the correct fork to use. They showed him the actual maps of London, meticulously drawn, tracing defined streets, marking established landmarks, presenting the city as a fixed, knowable entity. To them, a walk wasn't an opportunity for magical discovery. It was a route with a specific start point and a clear, understandable destination. It had a purpose. His searching, his lingering by seemingly ordinary walls, his wandering down obscure, unpromising passages, his moments of quiet fixation on a section of brickwork. To them it must have seemed like typical childhood meandering, or perhaps just being slow, being easily distracted. They couldn't possibly understand the cosmic significance he attached to finding a specific stretch of immaculate plaster, or a single specific hue of green paint on a door. One mainstream historical tidbit relevant here: mapmaking in the Victorian era was becoming incredibly sophisticated. Ordnance survey maps, for instance, aimed to define geographical space with almost rigid accuracy, cataloging every building, every street, every curve of the landscape, a secret shifting garden, a doorway that appeared and vanished utterly outside the parameters of such quantifiable, mappable reality. It simply didn't compute. A slightly quirky historical fact for context. The London Underground network, the Tube, was rapidly expanding during Wallace's childhood and youth, carving whole new routes and installing stations beneath the very ground people walked on above. Imagine searching for an elusive, magical garden door above ground, while entirely new structured routes and fixed destinations were appearing below your feet. A potent metaphor, perhaps, for the growing conflict in Wallace's life between seeking alternative, intangible realities and becoming grounded literally and figuratively in an increasingly mapped, quantified, materialized world. He did try to ask about it, tentatively, at first as a very small child, describing the white wall and the green door to his father again maybe, or his governess searching their faces for a flicker of recognition. Their reactions, Wallace recounted, were varied in their phrasing but utterly consistently dismissive. "Imagination, dear boy," spoken with a kindly but firm finality. "Must have been a dream." "Nonsense. There's no such door on that street," delivered with the authority of someone who knew the map of London, who knew reality. "You must have been mistaken, Stephen." The gentle dismissal, the kind disbelief, the polite authoritative certainty that what he had experienced wasn't real. It felt like another layer of wall building up around him, a non-physical barrier, reinforcing the idea painfully that his experience was either wrong, or a childish fantasy that needed to be outgrown, or something that should be quickly forgotten if he wanted to be taken seriously in the world of adults. It taught him a fundamental painful lesson. This particular truth, his most important truth. This reality he knew in his core to be real. It could not, should not, be shared with the inhabitants of the ordinary world. They simply didn't have the eyes to see it, or the ears to hear about it without filtering it immediately through their own adult rational disbelief. It wasn't that they were deliberately cruel. They simply could not access or even comprehend his reality. They inhabited a different state of perception. Historians still debate the historical trajectory of childhood in the late Victorian and Edwardian periods. Did societal norms, particularly among the rising middle and upper classes focused on progress and industry, increasingly encourage suppressing imagination and free exploration in favor of practical skills? Those skills deemed necessary by a rapidly growing industrial and administrative empire that demanded order, discipline, and measurable outcomes. Wallace's experience seems sadly to suggest this pressure existed and took its toll. His most profound truth was one that society deemed non-existent. As he grew slightly older, approaching his 10th birthday maybe, the conscious active searching continued, albeit with a slightly more refined, though no less intuitive approach. He learned the general structure of London streets now. He began to understand districts and areas. He knew with a growing quiet certainty that this was not a door that would ever be found on a main thoroughfare, not on a grand important street, not in a perfectly maintained, respectable residential square. It wasn't an important door or an official one. He looked in quieter places, side streets that twisted unexpectedly, small back alleys behind ordinary rows of houses, places slightly forgotten or overlooked, liminal spaces between the clearly defined public and private realms. But the results were always the same: solid, unyielding reality, miles of conventional brick, stone, wood. Each failure chipped away a little bit, at the edge of the brilliant memory, threatening to make it feel less like a solid reality he could potentially revisit, and more like a fleeting hallucination. A beautiful, comforting lie his child brain had perhaps conjured to cope with the inherent limitations of its world. But then, just as the doubt became sharp, something small, something fleeting, a quick flash of color in his peripheral vision, a turn down a street that just felt right, a peculiar quality of light reflecting off a wall that seemed for a microsecond to echo the garden's impossible luminescence. These fleeting signals would rekindle the flame of hope, keep it alive. The child, burdened now not just with the devastating knowledge of a lost paradise, but with the grinding frustration of a fruitless, inexplicable search, continued his private quest, perpetually scanning the urban landscape, scanning not for street numbers or signs, but for that one improbable singular feature that truly mattered, the key back to wonder, the entry back into a realm of effortless joy. As young Stephen Wallace moved from the fluid world of childhood, still containing pockets of unquestioning wonder, into the more structured, self-conscious territory of adolescence, the search for the door in the wall didn't cease. It couldn't. It was too fundamental to his being by then, but it shifted its nature. It became less of a frantic child's eye scanning of every passing wall and more of a deep subconscious yearning, a layer of hidden consciousness that existed beneath the increasingly demanding surface of his teenage years. Public school. It wasn't the garden, not remotely. It was a world built on different principles, a world of highly structured learning, Latin, Greek, mathematics, history delivered as fixed, indisputable facts. A world of fiercely competitive sports demanding physical discipline and unquestioning conformity to rules. A world of strict social hierarchy among the boys themselves, often brutal, unforgiving, based on subtle cues of power and popularity. He had to adapt to this world. He had to learn the system, learn its unwritten rules, learn its rhythms, and if he was to survive and potentially thrive within it, he had to excel within its often narrow parameters, and he did. Wallace, as you know from his public reputation, became remarkably good at navigating the rules of the ordinary world. He was smart, quick, capable, diligent in his studies. He learned how to please the right people, how to project confidence even when uncertain, how to master the systems the world presented him with. But amidst the endless Latin conjugations, the grueling cricket matches played out on perfectly manicured lawns that somehow lacked the wild vitality of the garden's grass, the burgeoning awareness of the larger conventional world stretching out before him with its defined career paths and societal expectations. Amidst all that, the memory of the garden remained. It wasn't always in the foreground, but it was there, humming gently beneath. It was his secret sanctuary, his internal point of truth, a private benchmark against which he measured the value, the authentic worth, of everything else he encountered in the conventional world. Was the intense excitement of winning a competitive race, for instance, truly comparable to the simple, uncomplicated joy of being gently nudged by a soft, fearless creature in the garden? Did the hard-won approval of a stern headmaster match the effortless, unconditional kindness radiated by the people he had met beyond the door? Wallace knew with an unshakable certainty derived from that one profound experience that it didn't. Not even close. This internal disparity, this constant private comparison between the dazzling, effortless reality of the garden and the strenuous, often flawed reality of the world he inhabited. It gave him a subtle detachment, perhaps even an isolating distance from the conventional world's values, even as he outwardly conformed to them with great success. It's a bit like excelling brilliantly at all your university exams, getting top marks, impressing all the professors, while secretly believing that the real education, the real magic, happened during those spontaneous late-night philosophical debates with a trusted friend under a wide, starry sky, exploring questions the textbooks never dared to touch. You were doing one thing impeccably, while your heart and your deepest conviction resided somewhere else entirely. Different priorities. A subtle split in his being began to widen. Then, sometime during his adolescence, perhaps 16 or 17, the door reappeared. He wasn't a small child anymore, clinging to a parent's hand and wide-eyed at every novelty. He was a young man, standing on the precipice of serious adult decisions. What university to attend, Oxford, Cambridge, what specific branch of law or public service to pursue, what kind of life fundamentally to build in the known world. It wasn't something he just stumbled upon during a casual, supervised walk this time. Wallace recounted one specific instance during his adolescence, a distinct, powerful reappearance. He described feeling a particular sort of desolate mood that day, perhaps feeling the weight of academic pressure pressing down, or experiencing the inherent anxieties and uncertainties that come with transitioning towards adulthood, seeing the fixed, seemingly narrow paths ahead. He felt trapped, hemmed in by expectations, constricted by the conventional routes that others seemed so eager to follow. And in this state of internal constraint, perhaps a desperate yearning for escape arose more strongly than usual. He turned down a side street, almost without thinking consciously about where he was going, feeling a distinct pull, an inexplicable sense of direction that superseded any logical route planning he might have learned from maps or navigation lessons. An internal compass needle snapping fiercely. And there it was, the white wall, unmistakable. Whiter, somehow cleaner than any wall had a right to be in smoggy London, its surface seeming for a second to shimmer faintly to hold some light of its own. And the green door, the very same soft, inviting color he remembered, the same subtle aura of mystery and immense promise emanating from it. It wasn't a dream this time either. He was older now, more grounded in the ways of the physical world, fully aware intellectually of the sheer impossibility of such a thing existing anchored in this reality. And yet, undeniably, palpably, there it stood, as real as the grime on the street. It wasn't just the sight of the wall and the door that impacted him. It was the sudden, overwhelming rush of memory that accompanied their presence, the resurgence of that pure, uncluttered longing he hadn't felt with this intensity since his childhood visits, the vivid, immediate recall of the scents of the garden, the impossible quality of the light, the feeling of being utterly welcomed and free. The magic he understood now wasn't solely the door itself. The door was merely the access point, the visible threshold, to an entire perfect alternate state of being. This reappearance wasn't brief or elusive as those childhood flashes had sometimes been. It seemed to wait for him, solid, patient, beckoning. He could approach it, stand before it, and the feeling was the same, that same overwhelming invitation, the same quiet, undeniable promise of shedding the grays and entering the light. The choice laid bare before him felt monumental, existential. It was a direct challenge to the path he was on, the path society and his upbringing had carefully laid out. Go to Oxford, study law, apply himself diligently learning the intricate rules and systems of the world, prepare for a life, perhaps a long and influential life in politics, the path everyone expected, or step through the green door, step back into the perfect garden. This moment standing before the palpable reality of the door, as a young man represented a profound fork in the road for Stephen Innes Wallace. On one side lay the world he was already mastering, the world of ambition, achievement, public recognition, the meticulously mapped, publicly acknowledged world with its clear definition of success, a world he was already demonstrating remarkable skill in navigating. On the other side lay the incandescent, shimmering, utterly unknown world of the garden, a world based on his memory of effortless joy, of unparalleled beauty, of profound peace, accessible waiting just through this unassuming portal. This was the point where the simple curiosity of a child encountered the conscious choice of a young man with growing agency, with the capacity to weigh possibilities and make decisions about his future. He could choose paradise over pressure, wonder over winning, the effortless joy over the strenuous pursuit of happiness and status as defined by the outside world. But the conventional world, the structures of his life, the expectations ingrained since birth, they had already begun their insidious work. Duty, expectation, ambition, the pride of his parents, the whispers of a promising future in the great affairs of state. These concepts, carefully instilled throughout his education, held a powerful gravitational sway. He thought presumably of the visible, tangible reality he inhabited, the sheer logic as defined by society of the path laid out for him. Stepping through that door again as an adolescent, making his way in the world meant stepping away from all of it, from everything he was supposed to be. It meant sacrificing the known world, with all its familiar struggles and potential triumphs, for a place that, while gloriously beautiful and fundamentally right in his memory, had no recognizable currency, no defined structure in the way society understood it, no definable success by worldly standards. It was a place outside of time in a way, and fundamentally outside of society, and his adolescent mind, caught between the vestiges of childish wonder and the rapidly forming steel cage of adult responsibility, faltered, hesitated, made its calculation. He didn't go through. He looked at the door, felt the intense magnetic pull drawing him towards it, heard the silent but utterly clear invitation resonating deep within his soul, and he weighed it against the visible, tangible reality he was standing in. He saw his potential future unfurling before him in his mind's eye, speeches delivered in the great halls, influence wielded in the corridors of power, perhaps even contributing to making the world, the ordinary world, a better place for countless people through reform and governance. The world around him was poised for immense change. Consider the historical context again, scientific discovery accelerating at a dizzying pace, industrialization fundamentally transforming landscapes and lives, social structures beginning to be questioned in fundamental ways, traditional certainties eroding. There were fortunes to be made, power to be wielded, reforms to be enacted that would genuinely impact millions. The stakes in the conventional world felt very real, very high. A slightly quirky detail for thought. Many intellectual and artistic movements of the era, like symbolism or aestheticism, were actively grappling with very similar ideas, seeking deeper non-material reality or beauty hidden within or entirely beyond the perceived mundane world. Wallace, standing before that door, wasn't encountering this as an abstract artistic theory debated in drawing rooms. He was encountering it as a physical, immediate possibility presented on a London street. A potential portal demanding a choice between those two realms of existence. He reasoned. He calculated. He probably, Wallace might have admitted later, justified his decision with the logic the world had taught him, with the persistent self-deceptive promise that he could always find it again later. Once he had secured his position in the world, once he had built his foundation, Once he had achieved a certain level of freedom through success and influence. Asterisk. Then asterisk, he would have the leisure, the stability to seek it properly, to devote the time required. Just a bit more work, he must have told himself. A little more striving now, then I'll be free to truly pursue it. A classic pattern of self-deception psychologists observe, or the endless postponement of true fulfillment in favor of chasing societal approval. Historians and self-help gurus might agree on this point across centuries. Later is often just another word for never. He chose the predictable path, the conventional path, the one approved by society, the one that led towards what the world defined as success. With you imagine a deep, silent sigh, or perhaps just a visible hardening of his jaw. He turned away from the white wall and the green door, turned his back consciously, deliberately on the radiant promise, and walked back towards the conventional street, towards his predefined future. He didn't see the door vanish this time. It wasn't presented that way. He simply walked away, breaking the immediate connection. The image of it, though, didn't leave him. How could it retreated again, back into the background of his awareness, becoming once more the beautiful, unattainable symbol, the incandescent emblem of the path not taken, a persistent, shimmering shadow cast across his vision by his own conscious, deliberate choice. This time the regret wasn't just the passive ache of a lost opportunity from childhood taken away by circumstance. It was about a conscious rejection, an active decision against his deepest yearning, and that kind of regret stemming from one's own choices bites deeper. It embeds itself like a splinter festering beneath the surface. You're hearing about Wallace now, a man increasingly defined by his burgeoning public persona. He trained as a lawyer. He moved inexorably towards politics, becoming adept at navigating the complex systems of the world, its laws, its social customs, its unwritten rules of influence. He built a career, steadily acquiring knowledge, earning respect, gaining traction within the establishment. The routine of public life, the rhythm of pursuing success became his daily bread, the dominant beat of his existence. Late nights working on intricate legal briefs, strategizing political moves, calculating public opinion, attending social functions where the right connections were forged and carefully maintained over polite conversation and careful positioning. Life became a demanding, relentless treadmill of external achievement. And underneath it all, always, humming faintly, sometimes painfully, was the memory of the garden and the recurring silent ghost of the door, waiting, appearing. Wallace recounted that even as he became a pillar of the establishment, utterly immersed in the world of facts, figures, rational debate, quantifiable reality, the door in the wall would reappear in his life, not frequently, not predictably, but at intervals, seemingly capriciously. Appearing often, he felt, when he was at moments of intense stress, or deep reflection, or perhaps when he experienced moments of profound hidden yearning, the suppressed longing rising unexpectedly to the surface. It wasn't that he was actively seeking it anymore, not with the frantic energy of his childhood, nor with the overt conscious weighing of choices of his adolescence. By adulthood, the door seemed to present itself to him, appearing unbidden, forcing a moment of stark, unavoidable recognition, a harsh juxtaposition between his busy, complicated, highly conventional reality and the simple, perfect possibility it represented. Imagine the scenario. You are Wallace, hurrying down a familiar London street, perhaps late afternoon, the light beginning to fade. You're on your way to an important meeting, suit-pressed, shoes polished, papers clutched tightly in your hand, your mind intensely focused, revolving around the intricacies of a new piece of proposed legislation, the potential loopholes in a law, the precise phrasing of a persuasive argument you need to deliver, the weight of responsibility pressing down. You glance up for a second, maybe distracted by a passing omnibus loud and rattling, or a sudden unbidden thought about a personal concern flickering through your mind. And there it is, tucked away off a main thoroughfare you just passed, down a narrow, slightly dingy alley you didn't consciously choose to enter, or perhaps on a seemingly ordinary corner you thought you knew perfectly. The white wall, clean, impossible, that seamless stretch of white that utterly defied the gritty texture and mottled colors of London brick. And the green door, smaller perhaps than he remembered from childhood, or was he just so much larger now, an adult of significant physical presence, that his adult perspective subconsciously shrunk the perceived physical reality of the portal, even as its symbolic internal magnitude had grown immense. It stood there, undeniably real, physically present against the backdrop of the busy-ish street, the movement of passers-by. It was in a location sometimes that he couldn't logically reconcile with any previous sighting or known geography. It simply was having manifested, it seemed, at that precise moment in the heart of his adult waking world. Perhaps it was nestled inexplicably between stern commercial buildings, or tucked away on a forgotten narrow lane running quietly parallel to the main road leading to a prominent building. Seeing it this time, after decades of consciously, repeatedly rejecting its invitation, after the accumulation of so much unspoken regret, after building an entire successful identity on the foundations of those denials, seeing it again must have hit him with devastating compounded force. He was older, perhaps tired, carrying the weight of years, the dazzling, pristine allure of the garden, now intricately intertwined with the deep, pulsing ache of countless lost opportunities. What did the door represent to him? Was it a final merciful invitation, an escape route offered just in case he might finally be ready? Or was it rather a cruel, perpetual reminder? A taunt? A flashing signal of the path he had taken? The path he had, through his own deliberate choices, perhaps rendered himself fundamentally incapable of ever walking again. In these adult encounters, Wallace was no longer an unguided child easily diverted, or an angst-ridden adolescent wrestling with uncertain futures. He was a man, defined by his commitments, his reputation, the public trust placed upon him, his ingrained sense of duty, and profound responsibility to the world he inhabited and was striving to influence. He had deadlines, important appointments, crucial votes in Parliament, speeches to deliver that could sway public opinion, countless expectations resting on his shoulders, placed there by others and just as firmly by himself. To stop, to investigate, to hesitate more than a second, to potentially step through that door felt monumentally, terrifyingly difficult, perhaps even professionally suicidal. In the rigid, scheduled cause-and-effect world he had built, how do you ever explain missing a crucial parliamentary vote because you decided to step off the street and explore a magical garden? How do you explain hours or days gone missing by the clock? The conventional world, his chosen world, had absolutely no space, no allowance, no vocabulary, for the extraordinary operating on fundamentally different principles. It was a world entirely governed by consequence, by schedules, by linear logical progression. A spontaneous dimension shift was most definitely not on the curriculum. It's kind of like being late for a vitally important job interview, the one that would cement your successful career path, because you spotted a particularly interesting-looking squirrel and decided to follow it down a rabbit hole you just noticed near the pavement. Charming idea in theory, yes. Terrible execution, if your overriding goal is getting the job, getting ahead. Wallace was supremely skilled at getting the job. So each time the door appeared in his adult life, Wallace made the same choice he had made in his youth, albeit now with a growing deeper ache of resignation, and a more profound, gnawing sense of self-betrayal. He would not stop. He would steel himself. Rigid his resolve against the powerful magnetic pull of the doorway which still emanated that potent, quiet invitation, he would push aside, ignore, the flood of potent memories, the resurgence of profound longing. He would ignore the silent whisper of promise that might have accompanied its presence. He would walk on, steadily, unwavering, or seemingly so to any casual observer. But inside the effort was immense. He would hurry towards his scheduled reality, towards his duties, his commitments. His internal excuses became more ingrained, more automatic, more practical. No time now, he'd tell himself, or this meeting is too important to miss, or the classic postponement later. I'll come back later, when things aren't so hectic, when my schedule allows, when I have more freedom. But later in the relentlessly demanding life of a rising successful public figure is often a mythical, ever-receding horizon. There is always another demand, another crisis, another crucial appointment. The hecticity of life is precisely what defines it. These repeated conscious rejections, they took a cumulative toll, a significant one. Each time he turned away from the door. Each time he ignored the pull and walked past the luminous white wall. It felt less like simply walking past a building feature and more like turning away from a vital part of himself. The pragmatic, successful Stephen Wallace, the one who commanded respect in public life, who wielded influence, That man was built paradoxically upon a foundation of constant active denials. He was constantly overriding his deepest, perhaps most fundamental yearning, burying the incandescent knowledge of a place where he had felt perfectly whole, perfectly happy, effortlessly at peace, in favor of inhabiting a world that demanded he compartmentalize his being, suppress his deepest feelings, and rigidly prioritize convention. Public life required a specific kind of mask, a specific kind of performance that left no room for this internal, wondrous reality. Wallace must have recounted one specific instance that felt particularly poignant. Perhaps the door appeared when he was struggling through a difficult professional or personal setback, a moment when the carefully constructed edifice of his life felt precarious. He felt disillusioned, questioning the ultimate value of all his striving, all his struggles in the real world. He felt weary, worn down, and he saw the door. There, just there, an open invitation, a promise of instant escape, a realm where burdens might be shed, where he could step back into a world of effortless peace and inherent worth that had nothing to do with achievements or status, but the conditioning of his adult life. Decades spent reinforcing the pathways of conformity, of public duty, of rational justification, the deeply ingrained habits of pushing forward, of stoicism, of prioritizing the work over the yearning. It was too strong, too deeply embedded. He must have felt the pull of the garden almost physically in that moment of vulnerability, like an immense, beautiful tide urging him gently but powerfully away from a rocky, painful shore he was clinging to. And yet, he stayed, on the rocks. He stayed anchored in the difficult conventional reality he had so meticulously built, even when given an apparent way out. It's like being offered a sudden perfect helicopter ride out of the worst rush hour traffic imaginable. Just hover and lift away, and politely declining because you've already paid non-refundable for the hour in the dreadful car park ahead. From one perspective, utter madness. Why wouldn't you take the escape from the other, the conditioned perspective of the conventional world's rules? Perhaps it felt perfectly rational. He had committed to a path paid the cost of his life choices, and saw no logical way to simply abandon everything for something not verifiable by conventional means. These moments of conscious dismissal, of deliberate refusal, became markers, notches carved deeper and deeper into his soul, symbolizing lost opportunities, not lost due to circumstance, but lost due to his own will. The garden wasn't actively withholding itself from him. The access point simply presented itself quietly, and he was the one who consistently, steadily, chose not to take it. He made the choice the conventional world dictated, again and again. It speaks volumes about the immense power of societal pressure, about the relentless force of personal habit once deeply ingrained, about the way the pathways we choose in life, the decisions we make repeatedly, can become self-reinforcing cages. Even when Wallace's story tragically implies a shimmering, beckoning door stands open nearby. A quirky psychological tidbit for thought. This could be viewed through the lens of cognitive dissonance. Wallace's increasingly successful public life, his deep investment in it, the necessity of believing it had worth, clashed fundamentally with his persistent secret yearning for the garden, that place of pure, effortless worth. This clash created mental strain, and one way the mind resolves this is to justify the chosen path, perhaps subtly devaluing the alternative, or reinforcing the idea that the alternative was either inaccessible or fundamentally incompatible with the reality he was supposed to inhabit. He doubled down on the conventional to resolve the dissonance with the extraordinary. Historians debating the underlying anxieties of late Victorian and Edwardian society often touch upon a feeling of fin de siècle malaise, a sense that the glittering age of industrial triumph and empirical progress, while outwardly successful, masked deeper societal or even spiritual decay. A feeling of being trapped by the very modernity one had created. By industrialization, urbanization, and increasingly rigid social strictures that seemed to squeeze the very life out of older forms of wonder and meaning. Wallace's deeply personal struggle, his private crisis at the door, resonates profoundly with this historical backdrop. His repeated rejection of the mystical, elusive wonder of the garden for the verifiable material gains of the conventional world seems to mirror a larger societal movement towards secularism, empiricism, and a loss of connection to realms beyond the immediately rational or profitable. and perhaps as a consequence a growing sense of spiritual malaise or unfulfilled yearning beneath the surface of apparent prosperity. Literary critics and historians analyzing the door-in-the-wall story still debate this fundamental point. Is the story purely a psychological allegory? A powerful metaphor for lost childhood wonder, the suppression of imagination and instinct in favor of pragmatic adulthood, a tale about the internal costs of denying our deeper selves? Or did Wells, and by extension Wallace's recounted experience, intend a deeper metaphysical comment, a suggestion about the actual potential porousness of reality itself, that there truly are other places, other states of being waiting just beyond unassuming thresholds for those with the eyes, or perhaps the will to perceive and enter them? Wallace, by his account, chose the world of rationalized, industrialized society again and again, over the elusive, perfect magic, reinforcing the dominance of his conventional reality with each turning away, while subtly, profoundly chipping away at his spirit. And with each turning away the door seemed to embed itself deeper in his psyche. Less perhaps a readily available escape route he just wasn't taking, and more now a shimmering, increasingly painful symbol of profound self-inflicted loss, the wound beneath the successful public persona. So you've walked with Wallace through his story, from the small child discovering the magic, feeling the pure joy of the garden's acceptance, then experiencing the devastating loss of access, to the youth standing before the door again, faced with a stark choice, weighing two realities and choosing the expected path of worldly ambition, to the adult politician rising successfully through the ranks, master of his chosen domain, but making the same calculated conventional choice each time the door briefly reappeared, a choice born of ingrained habit, responsibility, and perhaps growing fear. You see him now through your friend's recounting, the acclaimed public figure, respected, influential, successful by virtually every metric society holds dear. But you also see, illuminated by the light of his quiet confession, the profound cost of his choices, the repeated refusal to step through that shimmering green door, to reclaim that perfection. Wasn't it, became clear, a harmless act? It was a chipping away at his very essence, a gradual erosion of his capacity for wonder, perhaps, leaving a deep unhealed wound, a permanent shadow across his soul. Wallace carried his success ultimately like a heavy, increasingly suffocating cloak, outwardly impressive, shielding something raw and persistently painful within. Each public achievement, a brilliant legal case won decisively, a powerful speech delivered in Parliament commanding attention and respect, a strategic political victory secured through shrewd maneuvering, each felt in a quiet, persistent way hollowed out, slightly unreal. Because the real to him, the true undeniable reality he knew in his heart of hearts, was that perfect place, that realm of pure light, effortless harmony, and unconditional acceptance, the place he had glimpsed, known, felt entirely a part of, and then deliberately, repeatedly walked away from. It's like receiving a major promotion, a huge increase in salary, every external marker of success lining up perfectly, but knowing deep down you traded it for never being able to truly relax, to never be able to laugh from your belly genuinely, effortlessly, to never feel a simple, pure moment of uncomplicated joy again. Worth it? Wallace ultimately clearly felt it wasn't. Not truly. Not in the cosmic calculus that mattered most to him. The regret wasn't just a wistful, what if things had been different? It was corrosive. It ate at him from the inside, silently, relentlessly. He saw the conventional world he inhabited, his place in it, the rules of its game, with increasing clarity and profound disillusionment. He played the game exceptionally well, better than most. But he knew in that secret place accessed by the memory of the door that it was just a game, a demanding, complex, often pointless performance. Compared to the fundamental truth, the effortless beauty, the inherent value of the garden, the endless striving for more power, more recognition, more wealth or influence, it all seemed increasingly pointless, meaningless somehow, when contrasted with the effortless perfection, the inherent rightness, the boundless contentment he had known just beyond the wall. Imagine spending your entire life, pouring all your energy, your intellect, your very being, into building an incredibly elaborate, absolutely perfect, stunningly admired sandcastle on a busy beach, flawlessly designed, applauded by everyone who walks past, but knowing deep down that there's an actual, infinitely better, True, solid, glistening crystal palace hidden just over the single sand dune beside you. A palace that belongs to you, that is waiting for you, but that you refuse to enter, again and again. Yeah, that stings, that lives inside you. This pervasive regret. It manifested in subtle ways that his public life couldn't entirely mask. Perhaps it contributed to the almost frantic intensity of his work, a desperate, unspoken attempt to fill the immense void left by the absence of genuine wonder. Or perhaps it led to those moments your acquaintance described, moments of abrupt detachment, a sudden cooling of his normally polished, engaged demeanor in public, as the potent memory of the garden overwhelmed his current immediate circumstances, yanking him back to that private place of yearning. Your acquaintance might have noted without understanding its root cause that for all his outward charm and capability, Wallace possessed a core of inaccessibility, a part of him that seemed to reside elsewhere, perpetually observing the world of politics, society, and human striving with a strange, quiet, immense sadness. He was in the world, participating fully, but not entirely asterisk of asterisk it. There was a fundamental disconnect. It's a bit like trying to enjoy your favorite upbeat, joyful song, while in one earbud playing simultaneously and discordantly, you're hearing a really melancholic, resonant tune. The two don't quite sync up. The resulting feeling is jarring, and ultimately deeply sad. He saw the people in the conventional world, including himself, as players in a necessary, perhaps, but fundamentally flawed, performance. They chased phantoms, ephemeral things, status, wealth, temporary pleasures, fleeting public approval. All the while the true source of fulfillment, of deep peace, of absolute belonging, lay disregarded, often entirely unseen, just out of conscious reach for most, but vividly real and accessible to his memory. The laughter he heard in drawing rooms, in the Commons chamber, it felt forced, perfunctory. Compared to the genuine, unrestrained, unburdened delight of the children in the garden, simply asterisk being asterisk. The conversations of his world, layered with hidden motives, veiled strategies, unspoken competition, felt thin and tiring compared to the unspoken, simple, immediate communication beyond the door. His sharp intellect, so valuable in dissecting complex laws and weaving persuasive arguments, seemed utterly ill-equipped to capture, to understand, to even approach the simple truth and beauty of the garden. After all, you can't dissect a perfect sunrise with logical arguments about the refraction of light and the Earth's rotation, can you? You simply have to witness it, feel it, be in its presence. Some things, the most important things, perhaps just asterisk, are asterisk. And this applied perfectly to his potent, beautiful, increasingly painful magical memory. Wallace felt with growing intensity as the years went by that he had definitively chosen the lesser reality. He had picked a life of measurable substance over a life of boundless spirit, a life of quantifiable quantity over a life of ineffable quality, a life defined by the verifiable, the predictable, the material over a life of the truly meaningful, the wondrous, the transcendent. And the irony wasn't lost on him. Not at all. Here he was preparing for political office, aiming for positions of immense influence, where he genuinely aimed to improve the lives of countless people in the ordinary world, working within the structures, based on a value system that he knew in his secret heart was profoundly incomplete, flawed, because it fundamentally denied the very existence, the very possibility, of realms beyond its own narrow, rational material scope. He was trying with all his immense skill to fix a reflection in a muddy pool, while knowing the true object, the perfect original, was there nearby, perfect as it was, just inaccessible because he kept choosing the pool over the path to the original. This immense internal conflict, this daily juxtaposition of two opposing realities and value systems within himself, surely fueled significant anxiety, a pervasive, quiet, existential dread. Contributing to that constant pressure you could perhaps sense flickering behind his intelligent eyes beneath the polished surface. During the Edwardian era, this feeling of unease, of fin de siècle anxiety extending into a new technologically accelerating century, was palpable among certain circles. A sense that the outwardly glittering age of industrial triumph and British power, while seemingly invincible, masked deeper societal or indeed spiritual decay. Wallace's private crisis, his conscious rejection of the possibility of the mystical for the predictable comforts and demands of the material and social world, seems to embody this historical tension on a deeply personal level. It mirrors perhaps a larger societal movement towards secularism, towards a belief only in what can be measured and proven, and perhaps a resulting unacknowledged sense of spiritual loss or unfulfillment beneath the prosperity. Historians and literary critics still debate decades later whether this powerful story by Wells is purely a psychological allegory, a commentary on lost childhood imagination and the soul-crushing nature of pragmatic adulthood, or if he and Wallace, by extension, intended a deeper metaphysical statement on the potential, however rare, porousness of reality itself. The memory of the garden therefore ceased being solely a source of comfort, a hidden well of quiet joy. It became, as he grew older and more defined by his worldly choices, intrinsically painfully entwined with this gnawing regret. It wasn't just a pleasant recollection. Oh, remember that lovely place I saw as a child? It was something sharper. Remember that perfect place, the one you could have returned to, that appeared for you again and again, but you chose not to go back. Again and again. Each recollection of its beauty, its peace, its profound rightness brought not just a flash of fleeting joy, but also a fresh wave of the quiet, pervasive pain of a conscious, monumental opportunity cost. He had prioritized wisely, by the world's standards, securing comfort, influence, respect, power, but he had failed, profoundly, by his own deep private measure of what truly constituted a rich, meaningful existence. And the stark, terrible reality began to settle in with each passing year. His own choices, his repeated rejections of the access point, had likely made the path back even harder now. Perhaps the accumulation of conventional living, the layers of duty, the entrenched habits of practicality and disbelief in the extraordinary, had somehow obscured the door itself, or changed the conditions under which it might appear, or perhaps simply dulled his own senses, making him less attuned to the frequency at which it might manifest. It's the terrible realization that by choosing to lock one door very firmly, the door back to the mundane, to commit entirely to it, you can sometimes tragically make others, infinitely more precious doors, impossible to find again. You wonder, did this pervasive regret shadow every single success, every moment of public triumph? Did it feel slightly diminished, tainted, by the silent awareness of what he had surrendered, what he had repeatedly set aside? Did he perhaps sometimes see a fleeting flicker of the garden's light in the genuinely appreciative eyes of constituents he helped? Or hear faint phantom echoes of the garden's music in the polite, scheduled applause of a crowded lecture hall after a brilliant speech? Probably not. More likely he just saw more of the gray, complex, demanding world, the world he had so deliberately, so repeatedly, chosen, leaving the white wall and the green door behind him in the physical streets of the city, but forever within the potent reach of memory, and its constant sorrowful attendant, regret. So you see him, carrying this burden, this weight of deliberate rejections compounding year after year, Stephen Innes Wallace, outwardly soaring towards the highest echelons of power and respectability, inwardly anchored, weighed down by the gravitational pull of what he'd lost, or rather, what he'd consistently, actively set aside. The regret wasn't a scar that had healed over time, fading and becoming less sensitive. It was a slow, constant erosion, wearing away at the polish, revealing a deep, pervasive fatigue beneath the surface of his success. He had mastered the game of the conventional world. He rose to positions of real influence, but perhaps in his soul it felt like winning championships, on a dusty practice field, knowing the real game, the one that mattered ultimately, the one with transcendent stakes, was happening somewhere else, beyond a door. He kept turning away from his narrative, the story Stephen Innes Wallace recounted to your acquaintance. It drew towards its conclusion, towards its inevitable end, with a final, intensely ambiguous encounter with the door. Wallace was by this point fully entrenched in his public life, no longer rising. He had arrived. His career was incredibly demanding, his mind occupied constantly with complex issues of state, policies of social reform, intricate political maneuvering, navigating the delicate alliances and fierce rivalries of public office. He traveled regularly for his duties, attending conferences, giving speeches in different cities, sometimes late nights in London, working or traveling home. One particular journey, perhaps one late evening returning from some public event, took him through a less familiar part of London. He wasn't, he recalled, specifically seeking the door that night. His mind was by habit occupied with the world's concerns, but he found himself walking near a station. A London Underground station, perhaps. That detail stands out. Think about that context again. The tube network. It was expanding rapidly in this period, A true marvel of modern engineering, boring tunnels carving subterranean pathways beneath the ancient city, fundamentally changing the very fabric of urban navigation and movement. This infrastructure, this entire project, was all about efficiency, speed, connectivity, connecting points in the ordinary world, grounding journeys in tangible routes and predictable arrival times. Wallace's successful product of this world was near this nexus, this hub of rapid, relentlessly mundane transport. His mind, Wallace felt sure, was probably miles away, mentally wrestling over some intricate policy detail, rehearsing lines for an upcoming speech, already somewhere else intellectually. It was getting late. The ubiquitous gaslights, perhaps here and there augmented by the first experimental electric lamps casting their specific cold pools of light on the damp London pavements. The air carried the familiar, unique smells of the city at night. Coal smoke, dampness, a hint of stagnant water, maybe faint whiffs from pubs or restaurants. The distant, familiar rumble of the trains, ceaseless even at night, was a constant backdrop. London at night, even then, had a specific hushed yet restlessly alive quality. And then, with that same jarring, stomach-dropping suddenness of his first childhood sighting, amidst the gaslight and the sounds of the city, he saw it, the white wall, that improbable, seamless, clean stretch of white that defied the gritty, weathered texture and mottled colors of every other building material in sight. And the green door, the soft, unmistakable green, smaller than he remembered, or again was he simply so much larger now, an adult of significant physical presence seeing the child-sized entrance with the distorting lens of scale. It stood there, undeniably real, tangibly present against the backdrop of the still busy-ish street near the station entrance. It was perhaps in a location he couldn't easily reconcile with any previous sighting he'd tried to fix in his memory over the years. It simply was. It had manifested. It seemed. Right here, in the heart of his busy adult world, perhaps nestled between two nondescript commercial buildings that backed onto the street, or tucked away on a forgotten service lane running precisely parallel to the main path leading directly to the station entrance. A quirky thought sparks. Maybe the door isn't fixed in one place. Maybe it relocates itself, appearing not randomly but based on some unknown mystical logic, perhaps appearing specifically when the seeker is most in need, or most vulnerable, or nearing a nodal point like a modern station that somehow interfaces with interstitial forgotten spaces. A mystical form of cosmic wayfinding popping up when you're utterly lost, metaphorically lost in the demands of a meaningless life, or literally lost in a part of town you don't frequent. You know that feeling standing on a familiar corner, but suddenly not recognizing anything for a second, a flicker of disorientation. Multiply that by infinite magical dread and desperate hope. Seeing it this time, after decades of consciously, repeatedly, rejecting its call, after the accumulation of so much unspoken regret, after carrying the increasing weight of all those self-imposed denials. Seeing the white wall and the green door must have hit him with devastating force. He was older now, perhaps physically tired, weary from the unrelenting pace of his life, mentally heavy, the dazzling allure of the garden's possibility, now inexorably intertwined with the deep, throbbing, unhealing ache of countless opportunities lost. What did the door represent to him? In that moment, as a man near the end of his prominent career, was it finally a last merciful invitation, a path offered one final time? Or was it, more cruelly, a persistent, unavoidable reminder, a stark physical manifestation of the path he had not taken? The path he had, through his own choices, perhaps rendered himself permanently incapable of truly walking anymore. Was it access or judgment? This is where Wallace's recounted narrative, delivered to your acquaintance, became painfully fragmented, less clear. The precise sequence of events at this threshold moment became blurred, almost inaccessible. He approached the door. That much seemed certain. The pull was still there, strong. Did he hesitate? Did he reach out a hand towards the smooth, handleless surface? Was the door ajar? As he faintly recalled from his first encounter, invitingly open just that crack, did he try to push it, to pull it, to test its reality one last time? The specifics, as I said, are lost to the vagueness of his memory in this crucial moment. Perhaps because the memory was too traumatic to retain its sharpness, too overwhelming. Or perhaps because something unforeseen and abrupt intervened at that precise pivotal second. He conveyed to your friend a powerful asterisk sense asterisk of nearing the threshold, of the overwhelming magnetic pull drawing him forward, but equally he conveyed the powerful duality of opposing forces within him. Desperate hope resurging one last time, mixed violently with a crushing dread. Hope that this was finally the return, the opportunity to rectify a lifetime of regret. Dread that he was too damaged by the ordinary world, too deeply scarred by its compromises, too laden with its concerns and compromises and ingrained habits, to truly, genuinely step through again, to re-enter that place of perfect, effortless belonging as the man he now was. Or, perhaps even more tragically, the dread wasn't about failing to get asterisk and asterisk. It was the dread that he asterisk would asterisk step through, that he would successfully regain that lost paradise, only to find that the boundary between realities, so fluid in childhood, was now irrevocably changed for an adult, that he could enter the garden, but could never fully return to the mundane world he had built, leaving his responsibilities unfinished, his life's work incomplete, his connections severed, forever trapped between two places or losing his connection to the ordinary entirely in a final unnavigable transition. The ambiguity was immense, terrifying. The story recounted by your acquaintance didn't contain a triumphant return to the garden. There was no description of stepping back into its light, into its peace. There was no clear final choice explicitly made asterisk at asterisk the door itself by Wallace in this retelling. Instead, his narrative description of that moment abruptly ended. He was near the door, near the station, the ambiguity hanging heavy. And then, nothing more about stepping through the portal. Nothing about a perfect reunion with the gentle creatures or the kind people. Instead, your friend concluded Wallace's strange, haunting story, not with the sound of his voice fading, but with the stark, publicly known fact of his disappearance. Shortly after that night, that difficult recounting to a confidant, that close physical proximity to the underground station in a part of London that had perhaps briefly contained an anomaly. Stephen Innes Wallace vanished. He was in a sense found, but only his belongings. Discovered according to official accounts near a ventilation shaft, or an access point for the tube lines, he himself was gone. His body never recovered. His ultimate fate was never fully publicly explained. The official conclusion arrived at by authorities in the days and weeks that followed his disappearance might have involved some unfortunate misadventure. A fall in the dark near hazardous infrastructure. Perhaps something connected to the risky nature of the expanding urban infrastructure, particularly at night, when lighting and safety barriers might have been inadequate by modern standards. But the sheer weirdness of the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of such a prominent public figure, someone so established, so grounded or seemingly so in the conventional world, this mystery, it led to hushed speculation, to rumors circulating just below the surface of polite society, rumors that brushed uncomfortably close to the edge of conspiracy theories, or tales of sudden madness claiming a great mind. A straightforward historical explanation is tough to apply perfectly cleanly, closing the book on his fate because of the missing element, Wallace himself. This lack of a definitive physical answer for his disappearance leaves open that larger scholarly debate about his story. Was his disappearance a tragic mundane accident directly related to early poorly secured public transport access points? An ironic end perhaps for someone wrestling with an otherworldly door near a hub of worldly transit? Or did he finally make a choice? Or was he claimed? Did he step through the door in the wall one last time, only to have the fragile, adult boundary between realities, so robust for his entire public life, collapse in a way that was physically catastrophic, unable to reconcile the material form with the non-material reality of the garden? Or was the door near the station asterisk not asterisk the benign garden-leading doorway he remembered from childhood, but something else entirely? A different kind of threshold, perhaps one leading to danger, chaos, or annihilation. A trap set unknowingly by his own unresolved yearning, appearing only when he was weakest, most distracted, most alone, or perhaps located precisely asterisk because asterisk of its proximity to a modern conduit, the tube line, that somehow, perhaps in its tunneling deep beneath the city, interfered with or accessed interstitial spaces, making them dangerously unstable for material passage. Was it asterisk, the asterisk door, the one he sought, finally manifesting and claiming him? Or was it something else entirely, something that mimicked the longed-for entrance, drawing him in? We simply do not know. The historical record provides a mundane mystery. A public figure vanishes, leaving scant trace near hazardous public works. Wallace's own story, the one shared in confidence, provides a magical, beautiful, ultimately devastating one. A story abruptly cut short, leaving his final step, his ultimate destiny, forever obscured, in shadow, and in speculation. His end seems tied inexplicably, paradoxically, to the subterranean network of the city he had mastered, and from which ultimately, in the most fundamental sense, he failed to truly escape. His life, marked by immense public success and private yearning, ended not with a triumphant political victory or a quiet retirement, but with an unsolved mystery, at the threshold of the subterranean, a physical echo of the intangible doorway that had shaped, defined, and perhaps ultimately claimed his soul. So you are left, sitting there, wherever you are, with the story, the haunting, beautiful, melancholic story of Stephen Innes Wallace, the brilliant politician, haunted by a magical childhood memory, the vision of the white wall, the green door, the doorway that represented, for him, a pathway to transcendent joy, effortless peace, absolute belonging. You have witnessed through his recounting his repeated choices, consciously, deliberately, to prioritize the ordinary world, with its pressures, its definitions of success, and the deep, ever-present shadow-casting regret that followed those choices. And finally, the account ends with the last sighting, the last ambiguous proximity, near the rumble of the tube, culminating in a disappearance. That might have been accident, or might have been something else entirely. As the silence gathers again in your space and mine, imagine the lamplit streets of that era fading, the distant rumble of the trains softening, becoming one with the general quiet, the arguments and ambitions of the waking world, of public life, of career and consequence, receding, becoming less important in the quiet dark. You feel the soft, comforting weight of your blanket, perhaps, the settled quiet of your own space, holding you, enclosing you, and the garden's impossible beauty, the remembered scent of luminous flowers, the feeling of acceptance, the imagined touch of soft fur. They feel both vividly real in your mind's eye now, because Wallace described them, made them real to you, and impossibly distant, fragile, like the lingering echoes of a perfect song that you heard once and can't quite fully, remember, can't quite grasp its melody completely. The ordinary world around you, your room, your house, the street outside, feels solid, reassuring, predictable in its sheer lack of the miraculous. Yet perhaps, just perhaps, if you allow it, you sense the faintest whisper, on the very edge of perception, the subtle, unsettling suggestion that behind a plain wall, on an unremarkable street, in your own town even, a white wall with a small green door, might, just sometimes, appear. A door leading somewhere else entirely, but whether, in that moment, you would see it, if it were there, and what, if you did see it, you might do, remains a question. For the quiet night, let the weight of that thought settle gently, with you, without pressure, without needing an answer right now. Just breathe it in, let it dissolve into the stillness. There's no hurry, no need to rush to any conclusion, no need to decide anything. Right now, just ease into sleep.